Hey, what's up, comrades? Hope you're all doing great. We're here to talk about Dr. Stone Season 4. Yes, that we're back for Season 4. I've talked about the other 3 seasons. They're all excellent. But as a quick recap, if you're just joining us today, Dr. Stone is a show where the whole world gets turned into stone. But then one guy, Senku, I think is his name, Dr. Stone, he is able to keep his consciousness while being turned into stone, because you're like living stone, or there's like a stone cage that works as like a kind of like a cryogenic chamber somewhat. And then he just keeps counting forever because he's like a super smart genius. And then eventually the stone breaks enough that he's able to get himself out. And the reason why is sciencey. And so the whole first season he gets his best friend out, and then they're trying to get the best friend's girlfriend, but then they rescue this other guy who's supposed to be like, everyone's like got a superpower essentially, right? It's almost like a superhero manga, to be completely honest. So then they get the guy who's supposed to be like a caveman or whatever. He's like the they're all like teenagers, right? Or like young adults. And he's supposed to be like the strongest, whatever. And then his best friend is a complete idiot, but he's also super strong. And then they get some other people that are supposed to be like the greatest spearmen of like the generation, the greatest whatever, yada, 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 right? So they rescue all these people. And then they find like a little town. Well, so then Senku and Tsukasa, who's the caveman guy, they get into odds about like what they should be doing, because Tsukasa's like, let's just start a new world now and not bring everybody back, because whatever, when everyone was around, it was like war and like people are assholes and adults are assholes and shit like that, right? But then Senku's like, no, we have to rescue everybody, because he's like he's very like morally driven, and even though he's very logical. And so they get into a spat. Senku and his friend, Senku heads off to this village and he like makes friends with like his future girlfriend / wife or something. I think that's how it ends eventually, but we'll get there. Her name's Kohaku and she's a stone cold babe. But then there's like her sister's like the priest. Anyway, you can go back and see my reviews and stuff. Eventually Senku like sciences this world to like get a bunch of stuff, and then they have to go to battle with Tsukasa's organization, and then there's like a battle there, and then Senku ends up winning, and then Tsukasa gets like backstabbed by one of the guys, and so they have to stone him again, because they figures out how like the stoning thing works, and it's all like science, it's not magic, right? And then that's the second season, is the Stone Wars. And then the third season, they're like they get like a message from somewhere, and they target the message as like an island. And this is like in Japan, right? Like in real world Japan in the future, like 30,000 years in the future or something. And so they have to get a guy who's like I'm just gonna call him Ryu. So the Ryu, who's like a pirate captain. So they get him, they unstone him, they build like a ship, they take the ship to this other place, they have like an item that like turns things to stone, and then there's a battle there between like Senku's people and like the natives there, and they end up like overthrowing this organization that's going on there. They get like the stoning thing, and it's pretty good season. And then they decide and then they figure out the message is actually coming from the moon, and that like the original thing that turned everybody on Earth to stone was from the moon. And there's a whole side story with like Senku's adopted father, or like it seems like it's a stepfather, but then his mom dies, so the guy just keeps raising Senku as his son, so it's like his dad. His dad was like an astronaut, and then so him and a group of people. This is why there's humans on the Earth that aren't stone, right? It's because they came down and they like repopulated the Earth like thousands of years ago, right? And then groups like splintered and went different areas and whatnot. Okay. So that Senku and his like lady friend are like probably related somehow, but like so distantly it's like whatever. And there's no romance in this, right? I say that kind of facetiously, but I do think, because it's over, right? This is the last season. It was based on a manga that was over. And I do think Kohaku and him like procreate, if I remember correctly, but it's been a while. But so maybe it'll come up in the anime. Probably not, but she's she's a babe, so that's good. But they're like a really close friendship, if nothing else, in the anime. Okay, so then so now they're like, we got to get to the moon. How do we get to the moon? We have to build a spaceship, right? How do we get a spaceship? We got to go to like all these different continents around the world and get stuff. So first thing we got to do is go to America because we're gonna need more people, and we need corn to make more of the revival fluid, because the revival fluid is made with like alcohol and bat guano or something. I can't remember. And so that's where the fourth season begins. So the fourth season begins. We have like our main cast of crew, which includes people we've picked up along the way, which is like all the super geniuses in their own areas, and they're all on a transcontinental ship that they've constructed with like GPS and shit. But it's like an old, Spanish galleon or whatever. But then they have like all this kind of like, like there's the news reporter lady has like, they've created her like a recording device so she can record this for like posterity. And then they have like a GPS system based on like utilizing different, like it's not utilizing satellites per se, but utilizing like the moon and whatever else, and bouncing signals back and forth so they can triangulate where they're at. And it's a lot of like sciencey stuff, right? But it's all pretty good. Okay, so episode 1 begins. They're on the ship, and Ryu, the pirate captain, or the captain, and he's like the ultimate capitalist, I think is what his thing is. It's not, but he just loves ships as well, right? It's like he's got like a double power set. Him and Senku are like arguing about what to do, because the whole thing with like the fastest way to get from Japan to America is a straight line, but no, it's actually a curve is much faster because we live on a circular planet, right? So if you go in a straight line like on a map, you're curving around. So if you can curve up and around, it's going to be, there's less space, right? And he does like science to prove that. And then Ryu's still like, no, you're pushing the crew too hard. They're all Nova sailors, blah blah blah. And then Senku's like, no, like we don't have time because we got to get there, so we got to get the corn before the season's out, and like 40 days that's the most we got. And then Ryu's like, no, 70 days is fine, we'll figure it out. And so they decide to battle, right? But they're going to battle like science-wise, which means they're going to have a casino event, and so, which is awesome. So the casino event, and then there's a guy Gen who is like, he's the master like magician, right? So he's all about tricks and deceit and all this stuff. He's a great character, and so he joins up with Ryu because he likes the idea of working less hard. And then Kohaku joins Senku because they're dating, but also in my headcanon, but also because she has like eagle eye vision, like that's like her power set, and she's not like from the past. Like most people are from the past, but like I said, there's like this tribe of people who are like they've just kind of like been in tribes that like are going forward here, so they're from like the present, and so she's one of the present people. But even they have their own power set. So her power set is that she's got eagle eye vision, and she's a fantastic fucking warrior. She's like one of the best warriors. And so he uses her, and so then we just get like a fucking fantastic like casino royale scene where they're just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and there's like people calling Gen out for cheating, and then like Senku's like cheating. Everyone's cheating, right? But it's like who can catch who and who can prove what and whatnot. And then there's like fake and double fake, and that's most of the episode is this like casino royale scene. It's pretty fucking good. But then eventually like Senku and Kohaku win, and it's a whole thing with like Gen was trying to distract them, but in reality like Senku was like distracting them with like a thing, and he was using like a resin to like mark cards, but Genku didn't see it Gen didn't see it because Gen was using like a sugar solution and like a bug that sensed things to like understand what cards were which, so they could like gamble appropriately or whatever. So anyway, Senku wins, so they're going to take like the long way around. But then Ryu built a casino on the deck to like help people, and then they like double the rations, and they're like, okay, that'll people will stay more like the whole concern is the morale and the ability for them to function at like a higher rate because they're traveling faster and like pushing themselves harder through like the different routes. And they're like, we need one more thing, and then it's alcohol. And then at the end, there's like this guy who used to be on a sub, and he's like the greatest radar guy ever, and he has great hearing and all that. Him and Gen are like chatting, and we find out that this whole thing between Ryu and Senku was like a ploy. That was a ploy, so everything's a fucking ploy. Because they were always going to do the 40-day route, and they were always going to add the casino and everything for morale, but they just wanted to make it seem like there was a battle so people could get more vested in it and whatnot. And then Gen's like, that is all true. But I was actually trying to win the match. So no matter who won, they were going to end up doing this thing. But Senku won, and that makes Gen kind of sad. That's a banger of the first episode, man. Episode 2 picks up with a lesson about how to create beer and other drinks. Like quite a bit of time is spent on this. We then discuss. Let's see. Oh, okay. Then Tsukasa wants to get everybody trained up on weapons, make sure everybody's keeping their skills straightforward and whatnot. And at some point, we get the samurai guy. I don't know what to call him. I can't remember his name, but his whole deal is that he was on this island and he was a member of like a different group that left at some point, and they had like a Japanese style like society, and then like there was like the stones that turn everybody into stone, right? Fell from the sky, and then there was like the different tribes were using them, and then one of the guys from the village who was like related. He's like this blonde scaredy cat guy. His ancestor, or someone who was related to him, who looks just like him, was this samurai's like master. And he was fighting against these guys. He was trying to collect and destroy the stones because the stones were like this wicked thing sent from the gods to like punish them for their hubris or something. Anyway, so he like recalls that story, which we learned about in the last season, but just as like a reminder, because this is going to be like an important thing. Because again, it's like, what's the fucking deal with these stones that turn everybody into stone, right? There was like the giant one that did the whole earth, and the guys came back from space and then kind of spread out, and then, you know, thousands of years and different cultures came, and then like more stones fell, like these stones like fell, and they turned, you know, they were used to turn each other into stone, and that they have one of these stones, and that's how they were able to like, they're able to like utilize it at this juncture. Okay. And then this guy's telling this sad story, and then Francois, who's the master bartender or master host, right? She's like the ultimate butler / hostess, right? And so she's making drinks for everybody, doing all this drink stuff. She gives him a drink, and he drinks like one sip of like alcohol, and he passed the fuck out because he's a lightweight, you know. And okay, and then we get to Tsukasa trying to train everybody on weapons and fighting and whatnot. And then Tsukasa mentions to Senku that, hey, I'm a master hand-to-hand, like a boxer essentially, like martial artist, but I am, when it comes to weapons, we need the guy who's actually the expert. And the guy who's actually the expert is this spear wielder guy who was working with Tsukasa like originally in like the Stone Wars, but then he turned on Tsukasa and tried to kill him because he wanted to take over, and he's got like a little crew as well. So then Tsukasa's like, we got to bring him back, and they brought him back in the last season to like help fight with the whole situation that was going on between like the new island they found and everything. And so they stoned him again because again he like tried to murder somebody, and they can't like have that. And so they bring him back again because Tsukasa's like, I'll keep him under check, and we need him to like train everybody, right? Like that's super important. And so, okay, cool, we're gonna do that. So they bring him forward, and they talk about like what he wants to like help train everybody and make them better fighters. And he's like, I want 2 cures. And so they bring back like his 2 cronies, right? And one of them's like a perv, and one of them's like a cute pink-haired girl. I can't remember what their deal is. It probably talks about it in the manga, but I don't think it really dealt with it in this show, besides they were just like part of his posse. So they start training everybody and whatnot. And then we learn about the GPS system some more, how they have like this satellite or like this signal booster thing, and like they're tracking the hour precisely with like hourglasses back at the village. And then they're sending these signals about what time it is, and then Ultimate Hearing Guy is like translating that, and then they're looking at like the sun in the sky using like a sextant, and they're able to be like, okay, so it's 10 hours there in Japan, that are the coordinates, the coordinate where we're at, it's 12 hours based on what the sun is in the sky, so they can like do math and somehow figure out where the coordinates are, and that to make sure they're going like the right direction and doing the right thing, right? They're using all this navigation stuff. It sounds right because I know that's how shit works. Even after watching it, I'm like, I don't really understand any of this that's going on, which is part of why this show's so fucking sweet. Okay. But then, oh no. Oh, and then we got like a cute story about how the Vikings traveled across the ocean and how they use this thing called the Sunstone. And no one knows how it works exactly, but it would work even on a cloudy day. And then, then it starts raining, obviously. So they're like, oh no, what about the sun? How are we supposed to track like on the hour, like where we're at to make sure we're heading in the right direction? And then like Assistant Kun, he is like, oh, I have something. And he has Kohaku like, using her super strength and her like gorilla powers to like smash up this rock and make it into like a cute little thing so that he can hold it up into the sky. And it's like calcite, I think is what they say. And this is when light goes through calcite, it like splits the image or something. And somehow, even with a cloudy sky, like there's still light coming down, right? So it kind of lets you see where like the sun's at, because the sun, you make look a little mark in the middle there, and then you can be like, okay, the sun's there, right? And then they can see where it's at in the sky relative to them, relative to the other things, so they can still track. And it's like, cool, we did it. Is that everything? Oh, and then they talk about that a little bit as well, because someone's like, oh yeah, they always found these like calcite stones in like old Viking ships when they're in the ocean, or in divers. So that must have been what they did. And then some time goes by, things are going well, everyone's having a good time, everyone's having a blast, and then a pink-haired girl is like up in the crow's nest, which is a little thing on the top where you like look out for pirate ships and stuff. And she's like, "Land ho!" And it's like, hooray, they've made it to America. Excellent. Episode 3 picks up as we approach America, and it starts off with kind of like a dour note, because for some reason everybody had like this kind of misbegotten belief that there would be actually America here and not just a bunch of statues. But that's what there is. And so they're writing in, and everyone kind of comes to terms with like, hey, there was like a very minuscule percentage chance that here in America or just elsewhere in the world, people weren't turned to stone. Right, but that is not the case. And then some people get excited because like Lilia, who is the singer who like married Senku's dad and had kids and propagated the village, she was originally from America as well. So there's this one girl specifically, she's kind of like another big beefy chick that loved Lilia's music and whatnot back in the day. Okay, anyway, so then they split into teams. One team stays back at the boat, and the other team goes forward to kind of scout out the corn situation. And as they're driving around in their like hydro vehicles that they've constructed, they stumble upon sequoias first, which are like the giant redwood trees in California. They're like in the San Francisco Bay Area. And then even the pirate captain guy, Ryu, he mentions that he had been here before, right? And there used to be the bridge, and then the bridge, everyone turned to stone, and eventually the bridge fell apart, and the cars all disintegrated because it's been like tens of thousands of years or whatever. So they're going up the Sacramento River because Sacramento, California is like a prime spot for just like growing everything, to be completely honest. So there's supposed to be corn up in like the Sacramento Valley, so they're going to head up there to kind of look at that using the river to get there. And as they're traveling, they get attacked by, they say crocodiles, but there is no such thing as American crocodiles. So I think they mean alligators. But I mean, granted, if you just had like zoos and there were crocodiles and they just kept mating and stuff, like eventually you would have crocodiles in the U.S. And there's a whole conversation about how like the axis moves on Earth, but it moves very slowly. But it's been tens of thousands of years, so like the climate could be different, animals could be different. There's a lot of things that could be different. And according to Senku's like calculations, because of the GPS and everything else that's going on, he thinks they have like 9 extra days to like discover corn and get it, so they can start reviving people and then set up like a corn city here, so that they can go get the rest of this stuff around the world, and then eventually build like rockets and go to the moon to fight like whoever turned everybody into stone. Okay. So all the warriors like Tsukasa and Kahaku and everybody, they are super excited when they see the alligators because they want to eat meat. And so they kill the shit out of them. And then Francois prepares like a hamburger feast, and everyone's like super excited about hamburgers. Like the spear guy's literally crying. He's so happy that he gets to eat like hamburgers, which is Poesh. And then Tsukasa finds something inside one of the alligators like gullets, and it's corn. It's like a whole thing of corn. Like the alligator just ate the corn and it's been sitting in its gullet. And that means that there's going to be corn around here somewhere. And so they continue to travel up the river, and Senku is kind of getting like an unnerving feeling. And they call back to the ship and they're like, oh, hey, we found corn. We're just going to fly up the river. If you see any corn coming down the river, let us know. And because Kahaku keeps finding like pieces of corn in the river floating past them, and Senku's like, this is like way too convenient. Like I have some suspicions about this whole situation. And also at some point we get like purple-eyed guy, which like probably goggles, moving around and killing wolves with like a knife and stuff. And so there's clearly like a human around here somewhere. As they're setting up camp one evening, Senku is, well, I don't think they're even setting up camp, to be completely honest. Senku's creating a light trap so he can look at like the moths, and because there's a specific kind of like European moth that like is addicted to corn, or I don't know why they call it a European moth, but it doesn't explain it. It's just, that's what he calls it, like European something something. It's like a corn moth. And then also some of the moths that he catches, so it's like, oh, okay, cool, there's definitely corn around here, like cornfields. And then he's like, Kawaku, have you ever seen this kind of moth? And she's like, no. And he's like, hey, that's interesting because this moth feeds primarily on like clothing, right? Or cloth, but there's no cloth around here unless this is the trap. And then at the same time, Tsukasa is like standing there and he's like, I sense something. And he starts looking around. He's like, I smell blood rage. I sense like anger, and I sense something. And he's like, wait a second, someone's up there. Run! And so everyone like runs, and then this thing opens up with like a machine gun and starts firing at everybody. But the machine gun's clearly not bullets because Senku's able to like deflect the bullets with just like his little vehicle that he's crafted, right? So that wouldn't make any sense. Probably like corn bullets or whatever. We'll see. Maybe he's actually crafted bullets. I don't. It's kind of crazy. And so they flee away from there, and everyone's kind of like, oh fuck, and then guys from like the modern era are like, holy shit, that's a machine gun. What the fuck? And then everyone looks back at Senku, and he's like super jazzed up. He's like, oh yeah, that means there's another scientist that like figured it out and got revived himself, or like got revived. Here we go. We have a science off between us and like an evil scientist. I'm super psyched. Are you guys psyched? I'm psyched. Episode 4 picks up with the fleeing Senku's group, and they're like having a discussion about what's going on and such, and then at some point hearing guy, like sonar guy, is like, wait a second, I hear something. And then Kohaku's like, no, I've been watching the back the whole time. There's no one following us at all. And then someone's like, wait a second. And they look up and there's a fucking like biplane. Like the fuck? With the Gatling gun. Right? So it like shoots at him, and the guys like the warriors in the back boat like hop off, and then Senku's like, he is like amazed that they have this like plane thingy. And so he's like doing all these calculations, and then he puts together like a potion and gets the girl from like the Stone Island from season 3 to launch it at the helicopter, and then it blows up, and then all the fumes or like all the stuff from it like clogs up the engine and causes it to crash. And then after it crashes, the guy who's flying it like hops out, and he's standing there looking at the broken plane, and he has like this whole body armor kind of situation coming, and it opens up, and we see this like very feminine looking like blonde guy who likes to smoke, and then he's talking to somebody else, right? So that's clearly the guy who's the doctor, the genius guy, not this guy. This guy's like some sort of soldier, which gets confirmed later on in this episode as well. And so Senku and the rest of the crew, they like track down the plane before this guy can like call in reinforcements and do whatever he's got to do. And they find the plane, they take it, and they're like talking about that and thinking about it. And then they're going back and forth about what's going on, about like this evil scientist has all this extra stuff and this technology and like everything that's going on with that. And so they decide they're going to send like a little scouting party ahead over there, and part of it's based on it's going to be Gen, who's like the mentalist, and then Kohaku, and then like the assistant, which I can never remember his name. Okay, so they're walking, and then at some point Gen is like noticing footprints in the ground, and he's like, hey, you guys stay back but follow me from a distance and like keep low and just follow the flower petals. And so he's like going, and then he runs into like the soldier guy, and tells him he wants to, and then they like have a little back and forth, and then the soldier guy takes him to the like American scientist base. And this base is like legit. They got like a runway. They have like a factory producing like. So at some point, Gen's like revival fluid. Like the factory is producing revival fluid, which may or may not be true. But I'm assuming he said it because he figured it out, or I mean, that's what it's going to be. Because thus far the localization translation on this thing has been pretty decent, I would say. Okay, like nothing reeks at being like out of place or like modernisms or anything like that. It just sometimes you like miss stuff when they're localizing and translating things. Okay, so then we get to meet Dr. Zeno, who's like an adult scientist, and he's scary. He's got like these crazy like nail-looking thingies, and this is where he reveals that he's a scientist, that this guy's a doctor. They put him in like saline solution in these buckets, and he's hooked up to like a polygraph machine they've made, and so then it's like Gen is able to like lie convincingly, and they even talk about it, like the soldier and the doctor, how like he's either the most honest person in the whole world or the greatest liar. Either way, fantastic, right? And so Gen essentially is going to go undercover here. He's going to like join their team, and he's complaining about the genius on his side that's causing so many problems. And eventually they ask him like who it is, like what's the name of him, and so he does like the math in his head like Gen does, and how he's going to like play this, and he decides he's going to play it by having like Senku's best friend from like back in the day. He's going to say he's the mastermind, he's the genius. I can't remember his name. It's like Toga. I think it's Toga, something like that. And then it's like da da da. That's episode 4. Episode 5 is pretty baller. So it's kind of hard to talk about the show because there's just a lot of jibber jabber back and forth. But Kohaku and assistant guy have like tracked down the like cornfield, right? Like the American like science base, and they're checking it out. They're looking at stuff and whatnot, and then they use the radio to call back to the ship, the Perseus, right? Where everyone's now hanging out, like the big ship they took across the ocean, and they're chit-chatting about stuff, and they're being like very vague about things, like who's with you? The girl. Got it. Okay, no other information. And at some point, Senku just like turns it off, and they're like, "Why'd you turn it off?" Like mid-communication. He's like, "I don't want them to be able to track me or track us because we don't know their level of technology. They know that they don't know like anything about it." But then the guy calls in, like Dr. Zeno calls in, and they're able to like kind of figure out that he doesn't have revival fluid. That all these people that like survived were able to, there was something to do with like the nitrous, right? And that they were able to keep themselves conscious like Senku. And so then over time, when they were able to like break out of the stone, just like Senku was, and just like just like Senko was, right? But this is like a whole team of them, right? But the big thing they lack is manpower. Like they have some like super geniuses. They're all adults. They're all professionals, professional soldier, professional scientists, whatever. They're all like experts in their field, right? And so Zeno invites them as children to come join his team because they need manpower. They clearly have manpower, right? And they're like, no, go fuck yourself. But it's like, part of it is like, oh, there's all these statues. Why don't they just like create manpower? And it's like, they can't because they don't know how. So that's like their one advantage. The other advantage they have is like Japanese shit, like bamboo and stuff, which is very versatile. So then they're talking, at some point they see one of the planes like fly over them, right? So now they have like, the enemy has like all the positioning and stuff. They know exactly where they're at. And then they talk about how they can't really flee because of the whole situation, and how like then they get Tsukasa and Spear Guy to talk about like, if you're the enemy and you're attacking, what would you do? It's like, okay, we already got us pinned down. There's no way we can flee. I would build an attack boat with a machine gun and just come in and like destroy it and then attack from the air at the same time. So how do they stop that from happening? Well, one of the ways is that they got to have their own plane. And so they go out and like old man who fixes shit, but he's already like fixed up the plane so it works. But then they got to like take off kind of the runners they're using and put on like bamboo wheels, and then they got to transform the Perseus from like a sailboat to a fucking aircraft carrier. That's so fucking stupid. And so then they start implementing that whole situation, and they're working on transforming it and whatnot. And then there's like a funny scene with some of like the goofballs that are around. They're gonna go off and like save the day by themselves, and then like Muscle Mama like beats the shit out of them, drags them back. Okay, that's just like some side shit. We didn't get a lot of talk from Ryu, and from like again Ryu and Senku were talking about strategy and talking about how things would go and talking about like flying the plane and whatnot. Tsukasa and Spear Guy are talking about like what they need to do, and then there's like, okay, and then we bounce over to Zeno, who's talking again, and there's like a different Muscle Mama, like I don't know if she's supposed to be like black, like African American, but she's very dark skin and dark hair. So that's kind of my assumption. She doesn't look black. She looks like an anime character who's got darker skin, right? So you never know. Anyway, and so then Zeno, the soldier, this lady, and Gen are all having a conversation about what they're doing, right? And it's like, what they need to do is assassinate the scientist. If they can cut off the head, then that they completely win, because this is a battle of science between science and science, right? At this juncture, because they have more science technology, but they have less people, and then they got more people, but like slightly less science, right? Okay. And so they're going to send like an assassin who's going to be the assassin. Obviously, the soldier guy is going to go because he can do it. He's going to assassinate the doctor, Dr. Taiju. Meanwhile, Senku kind of figures out the same thing. He's like, we need to have a strike team that's going to go in there and grab the scientist from them, right? Because it's if they can eliminate like the head of the snake, right? Like if they can take the scientist either way, then they'll win. And so who's going to go rush in and do that? It's going to be Tsukasa, Spear Guy. Hearing Guy, because he's like an archer too, right? He's like a fantastic shooter. And then the little girl with the watermelon head, who we haven't really talked about, but she's around too. So they're gonna rush, and kind of the episode wraps up with both sides like sending their little like elite forces at each other to like take care of the scientists on the other side. And Gen being like, And they both made like these adorable maps of the area, and they're like doing all this stuff and being like very technical and stuff. It's pretty fucking baller, to be completely honest. We start off episode 6 with a quick recap of episode 5, as they do in these, and then we pick up with Sniper Boy, or a Soldier Boy, who becomes Sniper Boy very quickly, and some like smoking hot pink-haired babe, right, with like nice ass and nice tits and stuff. And then we meet like goofballs, like curly-haired blonde guy and curly-haired black guy, who are like, I don't know, they're like in love with her, and they're like assistants of some kind, but we don't get much more information about that with them. So we follow them. They get up in a tree. They're checking out the boat, seeing all that stuff, and then Soldier Boy sets up a sniper rifle, and he's getting ready. He's got like a windage meter and humidity and all this stuff, and they talk about bullet velocity and some old crazy shit like that. So he's ready to go. And then the girl at some point is like, what am I doing here now? Why am I wearing this ridiculous outfit? And he's like, you see, it'll help me get my aim correctly, because each stripe on your little outfit is like 5 inches. And so I'm going to have you go out there and pretend to be like a deserter for our team. Like you're going to go spy. And then when you find Dr. Taiju, you're going to stand next to him. And then I'm going to be able to like figure out exactly how far and yada, 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 right? Using the inches and whatnot. And so she heads out there. And then at some point, the Goofy crew with the soldier are like, wait, how long is this going to take? And the guy's like, who knows? And then they see like they brought all these like bottles of water and food and stuff, because it could be like days of them sitting there till she can like drag Taiju out, identify him, and then get him dead for that. Okay, because that's their plan. We see Tsukasa, Spear Guy, Bow Guy, and little girl, right? That's the 4 of them? I think so. They're all looking around for the base, right? And they're trying to figure out exactly where they need to go for that. And they talk about how important that is, right? It's like the off. Anyway, so then the girl comes out. She kind of like roughed herself up a little bit with like trees and whatnot. She was like, oh, help me. I ran away and I can't stand to be with those people anymore. And immediately Ryu and Senku are like, she's a spy. You know, so everyone else goes to like help her out. And she's super hot. So a lot of the guys are like, ooh, I'm so excited. Senku then goes over there and like charms the shit out of her. And then, you know, she gets brought on board. She's trying to figure out, she's like, okay, I got to use my feminine wiles. And like, I'm in love with like the quiet science type, right? But so that I can use that to figure out who Dr. Taijo is. And, you know, because they're obviously not going to just tell me who it is. And then Taiju's girlfriend, cloth making lady, she immediately is like, Taijo, I need your help carrying stuff. And he's like, got it. And then she's like, oh, okay, now I got to that's him. So I got to figure out a way to get him up on top of the deck. And then he's like on top of the deck, like moving stuff around. And she's like, oh my gosh, what the fuck? And then Senku comes over and keeps like using like Otame game rules to like charm the shit out of her. And she gets very confused because she feels like she's attracted to Senku. But she's only attracted to scientists, and Taiju's like the scientist, right? So obviously she's getting mind fucked. They're then kind of like interrogate. Senku kind of tries to like start interrogating her by using like the charm offensive, and then Francois comes over and talks about how like there's a better way to do this, and that's to like get to her heart and kind of like win her over with something. And it's like, what could they possibly do? And I think Ryu mentions ice cream as like the number one thing that people like and that most people don't dislike. So if they can create something like vanilla ice cream, that'll win her over big time. And so they talk about making ice cream, but the one thing they're missing is like vanilla, because they don't have vanilla. Vanilla doesn't grow in the United States. They don't have any from Japan either. I think vanilla is mostly grown in like Africa, maybe the Philippines. I'm not sure. But like, I think it's like Madagascar and South Africa, maybe. Anyway. So Senku, of course, that's never stopped him before. So he just uses science. He like uses electricity on something and combines some other stuff, and they get like an artificial vanilla flavor. Excellent. So they make that, and then they make the ice cream, and then like this chick he offers her the ice cream, and then she has like an orgasm essentially. It's like Food Wars. God, I love Food Wars. I should watch that next. And then, it's so good. And then everyone's like super excited about the ice cream and they're all loving it and stuff. And then Senku is like, hey, how do you like it? And she's like, oh my gosh, it's so good. I don't understand how you science this up. Like, I didn't realize science could be used for these things. And he's like, blah, 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 blah. And then she makes some passing comment about Zenu. And he's like, Zenu? And he thinks for a second. He's like, he's a NASA scientist, isn't he? And she's like, oh my gosh, how'd you know? And then he remembers from when he was a kid, and he tells everybody, essentially, or tells us, that his idol, his like mentor, when it came to like building rockets and stuff, which is what he was concentrated on at the very beginning of the first season before the world changed and they came like 30,000 years in the future or whatever, was making rockets. And the person that like mentored him or inspired him was Zeno himself. And that it's like dun dun dun, and that's the end of episode 6. Episode 7 picks up where 6 left off, exactly, where he's like, wait, Zeno, that was my mentor. And then we go back in time. That's right, 30 billion years or however long they return to stone. And then we go back to when Senku was 10, right? And we get the whole thing from the start. So him and muscle guy, I can't remember his name, Taiju are just like hanging out as little kids, and Senku's making rockets or trying to make rockets, and he keeps fucking up and doesn't know what he's doing wrong. So then they're hanging out in his place. And he spams out, like he's reading all these papers in English and trying to translate them with the dictionary and all this like crazy nonsense. And he eventually decides he's going to spam out this email to like all these different scientific organizations. And one of the emails gets to NASA. Right, NASA's always getting like emails from little kids being like, why is the sky dark? And shit like that. And they're like, oh, that's so cute. And they like respond back, you know, because they're like bored scientists and whatnot. And then they're like, oh, here's one from Japan. That's adorable. He wrote it all in English. And they open this thing up and it's like spreadsheets and complicated things. And it's it's like, I changed the matter converter to like something to decrease like that energy output by 7% because of this and that reaction. And they're like, what the fuck? And so that's where Zeno is. Zeno's a scientist there. And he's working on this project like Helium-3 or whatever, and it gets completely rejected, which kind of turns him into like an angry person, right? Because it's like his life's work or whatever. That kind of happens over the course of like this montage. But initially he just like reaches back to Senku and they email back and forth a lot. And this is like early 90s or 90s like internet kind of situation. So they're emailing back and forth. He's learning about stuff. Zenu's kind of guiding him and helping him build like a better foundation. Be like, hey, if you're gonna try to could do something, you need a thermometer. A thermometer is made of like platinum or some crazy nonsense. And they're like, oh, how expensive can that be? Can we get it at the dollar store? And it's like 500,000 yen, which is $50,000 roughly, I think. Maybe different in that era. So then Senku flies out to see his dad, who's at NASA, right, and to get his credit card, and then he flies back. And then we get the montage, which is like the main thrust of the episode, where we're just seeing Zeno and Senku like growing as like scientists, because we find out Zeno's about 10 years older, right? So Senku's like 20. I want to say he's about 20, because I think he was like 17, 18 when he got turned to stone, because he was still in high school, but he was like at the end of that period. And so that would have made Zenu 28. And then I think they've been in the stone world for like a couple of years, it seems, like 1 or 2 years. And so that would push him up to 20, and that would make Zeno only 30, right? Okay, so after Zeno gets rejected for all this stuff, he starts becoming very bitter. We find out that him and Senku's dad like knew each other, because obviously they both worked at NASA. And there's a whole thing where, you know, someone's like, what would you do if you were back in the Stone Age? And he was like, I would use science to like create weaponry and become a tyrant dictator and rule everything. And then him and the dad can kind of go back and forth about that. He's like, that's boring. Why would you do that? And then him and Senku talk about that bit as well in like email chains. But Senku's like, I have no interest in that. I just want to find out secrets. I have no interest in ruling or doing anything, right? And so we kind of established, and very well in my opinion, the core differences between Senku and Zenu and how they use science, right? Like Zenu is like hardened in his heart and wants to like take over, while Senku just wants to like expand and explore and continue to progress forever. And he believes like science is the way to continue to progress. So he's more like pure heart, right? He's a shonen anime protag. And then the antagonist is the same person, but just like slightly off, right? Okay. Like, they don't believe friendship is magic, essentially, at the end of the day. Okay. Yeah, and so it just we continue pushing. This whole episode's like a flashback, so we just continue pushing forward. We eventually get to like the sparrow thing, where at the very beginning of the first season, it's like there were like these sparrows that were showing up that were turned to stone, and there was like they're still alive, or there's something different about them. They're not minerals, right? And Senku was like examining that, and he wrote like a paper and distributed it online. And so Zeno got his hands on that paper, and then went to do like a presentation on it to all these bigwigs, and that's where there was like a thing, and it seemed like it's in DC. And the whole thing was, how are we going to, deal with this thing? Because it's like, he's like, I found there's like a heartbeat and there's like brain waves inside the rock, essentially. So the thing's like still alive. And, and that's where we get like Hot Chick and her two admirers are there, because she's like a singer and they're like her admirers. And then we get like, asshole guy who's the sniper, and it looks like he's a SEAL, because he's got some Navy shit on. But then he has like army pants. It's kind of weird, but I don't know. It's like a Japanese guy's drawn like stuff from like stuff he looked up online, I'm sure. Okay, and then we get Muscle Mommy and a couple other people that are like around. And at some point, when he's talking about the brainwaves, he tells them that like, hey, if this, as long as you're able to like continue to like think, like your brain, you won't have like you won't fall asleep, and then you're kind of gonna stay awake and all this stuff. And then that's like kind of when the whole thing gets turned to stone. And everyone's like, they see the stone wave coming, and so people like protect like the hot girl, or like the sniper guy protects Zeno, like gets in the way and stuff like that. And then everyone gets turned to stone, and then we bounce around to different people, and it's like all the motivation for them continuing to think, like continuing to use their brains so they don't like fall asleep. And like the guys who are simps are like simping, that's what's keeping them going. The girl is just like, no, I'm about to be famous, this is ridiculous, I can't believe this is gonna be taken away from me, I finally like made it. And she's just very egocentric. Zeno obviously is just like thinking about like science shit, and the sniper guy's like, oh, I just gotta stay awake, I've stayed awake for like weeks on end, that's not a big deal. Right? And then there's a couple other guys, and we get kind of their thing, so that's funny and cute. Okay, and then there's the whole thing, and then we kind of get Senku and Zeno at the same time, like accidentally or by coincidence. And Senku has a whole thing where it's not coincidence, it's just like a matter of course that the thing's going to erode a little bit, and then they're going to be able to break out, and so they both do. And Zenu is like, I think, like I said, it seems like they're meeting with the president in DC, like at the White House, but he's thinking about how like, okay, how am I going to establish like a new empire once I kind of break out of here? He's like, okay, I got to go to like California, because that's like the heart of like this corn thing, and that's where you're going to build alcohol, and you're going to this, and that's how you're going to have to build a society. So if there's any other scientists that like survive, like Senku, that's where I got to go, because that's where they're going to eventually go, and so I can go and set up that, and then we can all meet together, and we can like rule the world or whatever. And then they both break out, and that wraps up episode 7. Episode 8 continues our revival of the past, or recollection of the past. So we pick up with Zeno. He's cracked out of the stone. He kind of realizes nitrous has something to do with it, so he gets his old buddy out, who's the sniper guy. They have a conversation about him not being able to smoke anymore and how he's super sad eponymous about the whole situation. And then what to do next. So then they go around and they pour nitrous on a bunch of the people in the vicinity that were there when he announced that they got to like keep their memories going strong. And that's where they get all the guys. They get like, Dude Meister from what's it called in America? The thing that guards the president and senators and stuff. That whatever they are. And then we get the singing lady, like the hot lady, quote unquote. Her like adorers, and one of them had swallowed a ring from the previous episode that they were going to give to I think her name's Luna, the girl who's like spying on the current day. And it's made of platinum, so that allows them to make gunpowder and other things, right? Just like Senko did. That was a big deal with getting platinum from the spaceship when they went to the island in like season 3. Because platinum, you can do so much with platinum. It's like a very powerful metal, just like gold. And it's rare, which makes it valuable in that regard as well. Anyway, so then we see them like, moving up to that part. So they were in California somewhere because we see a little arrow going from like San Francisco up to like the redwoods essentially or whatever. And they're able to like cultivate like the corn and build the factory and build guns and all this stuff, and then there's like wild tobacco growing there, and so like Sniper Guy's like super pleased with that, and that's how he's got like his death sticks, his smoking, his like just like it's like rolled tobacco and paper, right? It's like fun. The fact that they can create paper is almost the most impressive part about this whole situation, to be completely honest. Like paper is like a newer invention in the grand scheme of things. And it'd be more likely he would just smoke in a leaf, because I feel like you gotta like, to get paper, you gotta like crush wood and like run a whole thing and like melt, almost like melt it down and like push it together or whatever. So, but they have a huge factory, so whatever. Anyway, so we see all that, and that kind of brings us back to the present. So then Luna, I think the singing lady, girl, hot lady, whatever, she's like, okay, there's Dr. Taiju, I gotta point him out. And so she goes to point him out, but then she gets super freaked out about like him blowing up next to her, and just like, the people here were nice, and they gave her like root beer and ice cream and stuff. And so she freaks out, and instead she like mouths Senku's name, because Senku knows Zeno to like her adorers, and so they see it, and then they radio it into Zeno, and then we learn that he has like an encryptor for their radio setup, which is pretty impressive. And so they, and we learn that because Senku and crew, like they hear like a transmission, but they can't interpret it, right? And then they can't interpret it without a spectrum analyzer and all this other stuff. So then Zeno is like, Senku, and he's like, hold on, don't shoot. And so then the guy doesn't shoot right away, and then he does like a whole analysis on like the situation. He like listens to his voice and thinks about when he saw him that one time like all those years ago, and is like, all right, he's a 19-year-old boy who's roughly like 5'7" to 5'9" or something. And so that when Sniper Guy is like looking around, there's like 3 guys that could fit that category, and so he's got to kind of figure out what to do. And at some point, Ryu is like, there's a sniper out there, everybody get down. And so like one guy gets down, Senku and Taiju get down, but like, and then one guy's just like freaking out, running back and forth. And so then the Sniper Guy is like, all right, so this is like a genius scientist. What is it? He's going to do the most logical thing. What's the most logical thing? He's going to like get down. He's also, this chick is like an idiot, and so she's being super obvious that she's transmitting something, and that she's just standing there where everyone else is like ducked down behind the ship. And so he like finds Senku, because he's like, okay, so he's going to be ducked down, but he's also going to be like noticing her and trying to see like what she's looking at, right? And that's true. So if he finds Senku, and then Senku kind of freaks out, and so he starts running, and the guy's about to kill him, and he's like, all right, Zeno, this is your last chance. You want this guy to die or not? And so Zeno has this whole internal monologue about how like Senku is like one of the best science minds of all time, and like with his help they could like go to the moon or whatever, but that he wants to eliminate the threat essentially to his like world power or whatnot. And so he's like, make it happen. So meanwhile, Senku like dives into the bar area, and then he's like freaking out because he knows the guy's going to shoot him, and he's playing like one step ahead as well. And so he's like fuck, and then he grabs all this like powder stuff from underneath the bar, and then he mixes it with like water, and he's like shaking it up, and he's thinking about how like there was like some theories about like mixing certain kinds of like powders or whatever with liquid, and how they could use it to make like bulletproof vests, but it was like, I guess there was no like it was like conjecture is what he says. And so he has this bag full of this stuff and water, and he's like shaking it up and trying to like use it and aim it like where the bullet's gonna come in at, and the guy shoots the bullet, and he's like, we'll see if this works. So the rest of them dead. And then we see the bullet go through the wood in like very slow motion and break apart. and then we see like, it's like we don't see him get shot, but we see like a shot of like red, like blood coming out from somewhere, and that's when the episode ends, which is super intense and very good. Episode 9 gives a quick recap of episode 8, and then we go right into Senku got shot. He definitely got shot. I went right into him. So they drag him down. Everyone runs. Sniper guy's like, all right, he's dead. See you later. You two, you watch Luna. Whatever. I'm out. So then he heads out of there. Meanwhile, Francois is working on making sure Senku's alive, bandaging him up, making sure and he doesn't have any shrapnel, and then the bullet actually, because of the flour mixture, like caught up all the shrapnel bits so that he's not like bleeding from multiple internal wounds, and then the bullet went right through him. There's like a whole conversation about how they didn't do it. They could have done a headshot, but they didn't do a headshot because they wanted, since he's like the leader, they wanted him to like be able to pass stuff on or whatever, or give orders, or I don't know. There's something. They don't really get into it that much. Then we find out that Luna, who's standing there like freaking out about the whole situation, that she went to med school for a little bit, but she failed out because Francois was like, I can do so much, but I'm not. We need like a doctor because he got like he's got shot with a bullet all the way through his body. And so she goes over and she was like recalling things that she knew, and she's like very determined to do to help. And so she starts taking care of that. Meanwhile, over with Chrome and Kohaku, they're looking at the Zenu's base and trying to figure out like, oh, we can't go in that way, whatever, and they're chatting about it. And then Tsukasa and the crew, the spear guy and Archer Boy and Watermelon Head, they all show up, and they have a conversation about like, okay, so we can't go that way. We could try going at night through the cornfields, but that's not going to work. Okay, what we got to do is we got to drill. They don't say drill. We got to dig underneath and get to them. And so they chat about that, and they're like, okay, cool. Let's just get Senku to make like a machine, and we'll take care of it. And then they get the message that Senku has been shot and that he's like in trouble and that he'll live, it seems, but that he can't really help with any sciencey stuff because he's like recovering and whatnot. And we find out that they also have like an encryption. They don't have an encryption device, but that they're using a cipher that was used by like Japanese warlords back in the Senku era, right? And so that's something that the Americans obviously aren't going to be like privy to per se, right? So they, maybe eventually they'll be able to like crack it and figure out what's going on. But for now, it's like there's no way for them to actually figure out what's going on. Okay, and partially also it's in Japanese. So like, do they speak Japanese even? Okay, so at that point, Chrome is ordered essentially by Senku that he's in charge. He's got to figure it out, and so he starts figuring it out. And he comes up with the plan that he starts figuring out how the distance, and we learn about how they triangulate distance, like the guys on the road who are trying to figure out road stuff. And then he comes up with a new machine that no one's ever thought of before, and he describes it and shows them a picture, and they're like, oh, it's a drill. And he's like, ah. So, and it looks like he just got to spin the drill, and we obviously have Spinny Boy here with the spear, so he can spin it super fucking fast. So he'll be the one to do the primary spear drilling business. And so they talk about that. And they're like, we're going to do it. Let's do it. And then we get a lot of Chrome being like, I am the scientist now. I got to do this and do that. Meanwhile, Ryu is like, okay, we got to, they're like, okay, it's going to take like 2 weeks to drill all this stuff through the ground. And so meanwhile, Ryu's like, okay, we got to get them to wait 2 weeks, not just attack us right now. Because if we can get that, that'll give us enough time to have our boys sneak in there and kidnap Zeno. So how are we going to do that? We're going to do that because we're going to give them the stoning device, the little item that turns people into stone. They've been carrying around. And so they do. They kind of ship it over to Arrow Boy. Arrow Boy shoots it into the wall. They take it to the guy, and then Gen like explains everything that's going on, and then they call him out for being a liar, and he's like, oh no, I'm just stupid. Anyway, but we find out that Zeno's like not super concerned because there's another doctor there who's like an engineer, who's this big black guy, and he is crafting, I don't know, someone says a weapon of mass destruction, like it looks huge initially, so maybe it's like a rocket or a bomb or something. So he's working on that, and he's like, oh, how long is this going to take you? Like a couple months? And he's like, haha, who are you messing with? I'm just going to take me 2 weeks. So it's like, aha, there we go, we got it. We got the Shonen Anime timeline. And so they got 2 weeks to dig, 2 weeks to create this weapon. Who's going to get there first? What's going to happen? It's so exciting. And here we go. Episode 10 begins with the drill construction. Well, not much of the drill construction. They more the tunneling thingy. So they have a shovel and a spearmaster is in there like digging. The old man is building the drill, and then there's a whole conversation with everybody about, okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to send a bunch of people over there to help, or just one person? And of course they send Taiju, who's like a rock and has unlimited energy and unlimited stamina and all that good stuff. I guess stamina and energy would be kind of the same. Plus, he's super strong. So anyway, so he's going to take the drill and a bunch of other stuff and drive over there. And so while he's driving out of there, the two Luna fans, one of them's Carlos, I didn't catch the other guy's name, they start talking about, like, well, one of us should follow that guy and see what's going on, and everyone can stay with Luna. And so they get into a little fight. And then right when they get done with their little fight, determining who's going to stay with Luna, Taiju's like standing there. He's like, hey, what's up? I know you guys are spying on us, and one of you is probably going to want to follow me, so if you might as well just hop in the vehicle and we'll just go together. And they're like, no, we don't speak Japanese at all. And he's like, I don't know what you're saying because I don't speak English, which is kind of like funny, I guess. It's silly. Anyway, so then Carlos, that's how I know his name, they keep saying it. He's the one who has to go with Taiju, so he gets in the truck, and then we find out Taiju has absolutely no idea how to drive this like vehicle, and so he's like crashing it and stuff. But Carlos was Lady Luna's driver, and so he's able to figure it out pretty quick. So he gets Taiju with all the equipment over to Chrome and Tsukasa and everybody else, Kohaku. And they tie him up, and they talk about, like, why'd you bring him over here? And he's like, well, he's going to spy us anyway, so, like, whatever. And like, oh, okay. And then Taiju's like, we should untie him. He's my friend. And they're like, no. That's stupid. And so anyway, so we get, like, a montage of them, like, doing all this stuff. Like, it's like the science part, right, of each episode, where it's like, okay, we need to pump air in there so people can breathe. We need to, like, move this out. We need to do this. We need to use, like, these drones and these, like, these, like, little engines and stuff. And finally they get to, like, I don't know, bedrock or some really hard rock part, and it's like drill time. So then they activate the drill using like their generators and everything, and they burst through, and they're like, hooray! And then Carlos is like, oh my gosh, these are like teenagers, like they're as old as Lady Luna, like what the fuck? Like, how are they doing this? And so then they we switch back over to, speaking of Luna, we jump back over to Luna. So Ryu is with the old man getting the aircraft carrier going and getting the plane set up, like, and then at the same time we go down to Senku, and Senku's dictating to Francois like battle plans and things they can do to like modify things and whatnot, and the Luna gets like very concerned, and so does a girlfriend, I can't remember what her name is, the one who's very good at like cloth stuff, that's Taiju's girlfriend. And they're working on him, and then he's like telling Luna what to do, and she's having like, you know, oh, I was instantly in love with him, he's so powerful and so wonderful and he's the best, and I don't know what to do. And she's like, oh, you have like, you know, the breathing on your left side is a little weak. And he's like, oh, I must have blood in my lung, I need you to like take a needle and like pull it out. And then she kind of freaks out, but eventually she's like, I'll do it. And he's like, hey, it's okay, I know you're a spy, but you're all I got, so you know, please help me. And so then she like essentially confesses her love to him or whatever, and it's like, I'll do it, but you have to be my boyfriend. And then we get a message, we go back over to Carlos and Chrome and everybody, and they get a message from the base, and the message is that Senku and Luna are now dating. And then Carlos like freaks out, and at some point they're like, hey, we don't, before this happened, like the Chrome and them are like, we don't want to pop up in like the barracks of the base, we want to pop up someplace where we can maneuver, and so we need like a map. But they all look at Carlos, and he's like, and then after he finds out that Lady Luna is like tied herself with Senku's team, he's like, me and my friend are always 100% team Lady Luna, so if she's with you guys, we're with you guys. So then he draws them the map of like the base, so they're like, excellent. So then they keep working on that. We jump over, and then at some point they're like, oh, tell them we're going to do this thing. And why are we telling them that necessarily? We're going to dictate this because Gen's also listening in, and Gen is like a slimy sneak, so he's definitely going to like be able to figure out that we're using the cipher and translate it and whatnot. And so then we jump over Gen, who is in the base with Zeno and everything, and he's listening, and he's like doing his mind palace or whatever, so he can like figure out exactly what the message is, and he figures it out. But right, he figures it out, they finish with like their project, and then the big muscle mama like jumps inside and like bars Gen from coming inside like the production facility or whatever, and then everyone's like, aha, it's done, and within 48 hours we have won this war, ha ha ha. And Gen's trying to like he's trying to math, figure out what's going on without being able to see anything, so he can like let people know. All right, and then we get what's his name, the the special forces guy who can like fly planes, he's flying over. He's starting to come, and so then and then we get a funny scene where Luna's in like the bar talking about Senku being her boyfriend, and it doesn't mean anything, and she like is talking out loud, and then like there's like a bunch of people like the newscaster lady and glasses guy and stuff like sitting at another table nearby like eating and drinking, and she's like, what do you guys think? And they all kind of like do, and then she's like, why do you guys look so sketchy? Like, because her whole concern is that this, I mean, I know Senku probably doesn't love me, but he probably likes me a little bit. He wouldn't agree to like be my boyfriend if he didn't have like an ounce of feeling or whatever. And then one of them's like, well, he did get married purely out of like convenience to like move his plot forward essentially, and then he got divorced immediately afterwards, and she's like, what? So like being your boyfriend is like whatever, I don't care. Okay, and then a plane comes by, like the bad guy's plane, Zeno's plane, flown by the special forces guy, I'm assuming. And that's when Ryu, like, they're like, all right, let's execute this thing. And so then Ryu hops in their plane that they fixed up on the aircraft carrier. And then Senku pops up, and he pops in too. Because Ryu at some point is like, this is the memory of Senku. And Senku hops in the back. He's like, I'm not dead yet, motherfucker. And then they take off, and it's like, woo! And it's like, all right, time for a dogfight. And that's episode 10. Episode 11 here gets really fucking good. And so it gets really good because we have a lot of fighting. It's all shown in the anime battle stuff. It's fantastic. So we pick up with the dogfight in the air. And so we get all these maneuvers, and we get this like short bald guy. I don't remember where he came from, but he's something. Anyway, he kind of describes all the maneuvers so there's Ryu and Senku, and then there's the assassin or the special forces guy, right? And they're like dogfighting. They're like, we get an explanation that like you want to be on the person's 6 so you can like target into them and blast them real good. So there's all these maneuvers. They're doing stuff where they're like slowing down, they're braking, they're like pulling up, they're like shooting straight into the sky, and so coming down back at them. So that's most of the episode. All this stuff's going on, and while that's going on, we kind of switch over to the samurai guy, and he's on the ground like watching and looking, and he's like, I don't feel right about this. Something's going on. And something is going on, because the thing that they created on Zeno's side is a fucking submarine. So Muscle Mama and a bunch of other dudes are riding in the submarine, and they crash into the carrier, and then all these like big beefy like what do you call it? Secret Service guys, or soldiers or whatever. They pop. I don't know where they're like big brawny like dudes. So they all pop out, and they are able to like capture the ship for the most part. But then like bad guy from the previous season, who's kind of like the spear guy's like protege at this point, and samurai guy, they beat up a bunch of them, and they go up and they're like fighting against the machine guns and everything and whatnot. And then at some point, Senku and Ryu, they get in a position where they are dropping bombs on the opposing plane using that like gas stuff that they used previously to jack up the engine. And so they do that. Oh, and then we keep skipping back over to Zeno, who's talking again about like maneuvers and maneuvers on maneuvers and like plans and like 3D chess and all that bullshit. Anyway, so we hop back over. So the first plane crashes, and then Senku accidentally cracks one of these bombs inside their plane, so then they crash, and so they're all down, and then they're like, oh, right, there he is, let's go. And they go, and then they get the machine gun shot at him, and Ryu's like, that's not what's his fuck, because he would have never missed. And so they run up, and it's some lady, and she's like, ha, we got you. You thought that I was going to be that guy, but I'm not that guy, because he's like our secret weapon, and we took over your like aircraft carrier. And then we go back over, and the sub, like, the dude literally like flies out of the top, like it's launched out of it, lands on the ship, and beats the shit out of the one guy who's a really good fighter and super strong and all this stuff. And then the samurai guy, who's also a really good fighter, beats them both like almost instantaneously. And it's like, ta-da. And then Senku's like, aha. So it appears like you got your like triple S plus like gotcha game logic knight to take over our ship. But unfortunately for you, we also have our knight. And then we switch over to Zeno, and we see at that exact moment that Tsukasa like bashes through the ground and pulls his spear up and rushes at Zeno. And Zeno's like, what the fuck? And that's where the episode ends. It's so good. So fucking good, y'all. Bro. As we hit the mid-season here, we're finally the end of like part 1 of the first season of the season. We wrap up stuff and get moving forward. So Zeno gets captured by Tsukasa and his crew. He immediately figures out that they dug a tunnel, and then we get like a little story of them. Like they ended up in like the cow pastures, saw the corn, everything else, and then they kind of snuck into the base, and they joined up with Gen and picked up Zeno, and then they're headed back, and they're being chased by the engineer guy, the black guy who built the submarine, and his crew, but then they like blow the tunnel, but unfortunately blowing the tunnel like blows the whole tunnel on both sides, and so then it becomes a race so you can go back and forth. And then Chrome overhears the engineer guy being like, hey, we're not gonna, like, we gotta dig these people out, no one needs to die, like there's no reason to fight, blah 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 blah, right? So he's clearly like the most level-headed of this whole crew on this side. Anyway, Taiju and Chrome are able to like meet up, and then they're able to escape. They get all the way back to the ship. Meanwhile, on the ship, the guy with the glasses comes up. He sees Luna captured. He rescues her, and then they rescue Francois and their engineer, the old man. I think that's all they rescue. And then they they jump off the ship and they head up to meet up with Tsukasa and that crew. And then Senku and Ryu come up, and now we have like the forward party. And what exactly is the forward party? The forward party is the one that's going to take Zeno and keep going. And so then they come up with the scheme that they're going to head, and this has got to be like multiple volumes, or not volumes, but chapters, I assume, because it goes like super fast, right? Because they got to cram in like a lot of information, because this is the last season. And we got to get to the moon somehow and do that. Fight with like Dr. X or whatever. Or he's Dr. X. So they got to fight with whoever's on the moon. It's causing all this stuff in the first place. Okay, so then... So the forward party decides they're going to rush back over to the base because no one's going to expect them to come back, and then grab like their ship. So they go and grab their ship, and then they're sailing back, and then they put like the stone thing on the front of the bow, and then someone like calls it out like, oh, they got the stone thing, and everyone like ducks and what's his face? Stanley. Stanley's the sniper. I finally heard his name like 5 times, so I remember now. So Stanley like starts to shoot at him, and before this occurs, they're talking back and forth about like, we got to make a deal with the other side so they can start building the city of Corn so we can get enough shit together. So when we get all the other cities, we can blast off to the moon. And there's like a nice little moment between Zeno and Senku where they're like chit-chatting about like the various things they're involved with and whatnot. They like reminisce a little bit. So, and then Luna gets like super, oh, I'm in love with Senku, I'm so happy, yeah, blah blah blah. Okay, going forward. They talk to the engineer guy. They make a deal that they're gonna create a city with like 1 million people in it, and the people on the ship know how to make the revival fluid, so they can do that. And then they're engineering, but they have to like make a deal, right? So they have to negotiate. So then the journalist lady tries to negotiate with them because they don't speak Japanese and English back and forth, and she kind of does. And then she gets kind of freaked out because she's not a very good negotiator because she's just like a journalist. And then like Muscle Mama on that side, so there's like Muscle Mama on Zeno's side, and then there's like the Muscle Mama that was part of Tsukasa's crew that is now part of like the Kingdom of Science. So she gets on there, and then they like go back and forth, and they actually are able to like diplomatically come to a terms where it's like she's the president of Japan and he's the president of America, essentially, and they're going to work together to build this city, and they agree to all these terms to be set free, to be allowed to just do that and do whatnot. And so after Senku and crew, they burst past. There's like a lot of conversation about how Stanley's not going to be like a big fan of this whole situation, that he's just going to want to get Zeno back, and that Zeno is kind of like a prime component of like causing problems. So he's going to go with Senku and stuff, and then they're like, that's fine, we'll bring Stanley with us, that way he's not interfering with like the city you're going to build over here, and we'll figure that shit out. And Stanley's like pretty impressed by their whole shebang, with like, he realizes that Gen was like lying to him about the stone thing and everything else, and so it's kind of like, okay, I see. And so they start working on the city over there, but then right before the Senku and crew like head off to Brazil, it looks like, or somewhere in South America, because that's where like the initial stone that took over like the whole world like began. The stoning, I should say. They say goodbye, and there's like a whole super cute like shonen anime scene where it's like Stanley just shot at him with a machine gun, and then Chrome's running up to say goodbye, and Taiju's like super sad because his girlfriend's staying behind, like his wife essentially, and no one knows when they're gonna see each other again, right? It could be years. And so he's like, I don't give a fuck if I'm gonna go say goodbye, and so everyone like rushes up to the I don't know, the ship deck, the deck of the ship, and they're all like, they do this like fist raising thing, which is like super shonen, and they're like goodbye, it's like they're saying goodbye, and everyone on the other ship saying goodbye, and Stanley like picks up his gun to shoot, and he's like, nah. Right? It's like, it's so shonen, it's so good, it's like, damn, dude. It's excellent. And then they head off to South America, so fucking baller, and then we'll proceed forward. So we pick up the second half of the season with episode 13, and Zeno, as a little kid, creating a railgun. And we learn that he meets Stanley here. So he's trying to shoot a pumpkin with this railgun and it's missing. So he's like doing recalculations. And Stanley wanders up as a little kid also and is like, it's like user error. And he's like, let me show you. And he like, by instinct, just kind of readjusts the aim of the railgun and it destroys the pumpkin. And then they like chit chat about being science and being friends and whatnot. And so they've been friends forever. Oh, it's not just because they were working for the government together and they're both super good at stuff. They like recognize what is a game, recognized game from the get-go. We then jump forward to the present. We get kind of like a lot of random stuff that's going on. So Samurai is still injured. And while they're trying to get everything organized with like putting crap on the ship and building the neutral kingdom of Corn and all that kind of stuff, they take him and put him on the carrier for some reason so that he can get help or something. And then his boss, the coward guy, he was hiding on the ship the whole time, the aircraft carrier. And the aircraft carrier is now following Zeno's ship, which is being driven by Ryu down to South America. And so Samurai and Coward have like a conversation, and Coward keeps hiding so he can get information. And then Stanley comes down and threatens to kill Samurai unless he tells them where. I'm sorry. Where the other guys are going. Senku and everybody. Kingdom of Science. That's what I was trying to think of. And so Coward gets super scared and hops up and he's like, oh, they're going to South America. I don't know what that means, but that's what they said they were going. And Stanley's like, tee-hee. So then we hop over to the Kingdom of Science people and they're having a conversation at some point. Like a lot of the stuff bounces back and forth, but essentially we get a recap of the first season because usually there's a break between the first half and second half of the seasons in Japanese. That's why the animes will be like a different thing. So you'll have like a season ender and then to pick up another season, but it's all like a continuous season anyway. So let's see. We get a recap of everything that's occurred, which we just talked about for the last like half an hour. So we're not going to go through that. And then everybody's up top having tea and chilling and stuff. And Senku and Zeno are downstairs trying to figure out stuff. They're talking about Senku's dad and how they're both like knew him because he worked at NASA and Zeno worked at NASA, and how they like avoided the stoning ray because they were high enough up, but then they got to figure out exactly where in like Brazil. They keep saying South America, but I think at some point they switch over to big. No, it's in like the Amazon rainforest somewhere. It's in Brazil. And so they do all these like experiments, and then at some point Chrome gets bored of being upstairs and comes down to like see what they're doing, and they're just like blowing bubbles and shit. And he's like, the fuck are you guys doing? And they start talking about that, and then they talk a lot of science jargon, and then old man comes in and gives them like a perfect globe that he's constructed. And so then they talk about how like to triangulate, they need to figure out like when Senku and when Xenos both like got petrified and how things are working that way, and like the time difference and like curvature of the earth and like all that like crazy shit. So they're going off about that and using the bubbles because bubbles will like break across, in like a similar fashion, so they can. And then they talk about science generally and how science isn't just like you have an intuition and you go with it. It's like anything can be true. If someone has like a thing and it's like repeatable, then that means there's probably something to it, right? And this is like good information because a lot of people get confused by this. They'll see like, especially because science has been like utilized as like a political weapon these days. But people will like read a study and they'll be like, that's facts. And it's like, one study does not make facts. Repeatability does, which is the whole point, right? It's like if you find something, the whole goal is for other people to try it as well, and that are away from you in a different area with different like expectations. Because if they are finding the same thing, then it's like, this is a fact. Like this is actually what's happening. This is like the law of science, or like a working theory, right? Because now it's not just that you've done it once, because once is like, who gives a fuck if you've done it once, right? Even if you got a huge population size, it's like, no one cares. Like people get like way into this idea that like, oh yeah, we did it. This one group did a thing one time, and therefore, and it's like, no, you're retarded. That's not how that works. Anyway, so repeating it over and over and over and over again, that's like the key component to understanding science. So they talk about that a lot, and how that ghosts could be real. And if someone's like, oh, there's ghosts, and they're like, okay, what tells you there's ghosts? And it's like change in temperature, and it's like, when did that happen? Once. They're like, go fuck yourself. But if it happens like multiple times, then it's like, okay, now we're going to study it, because like what is causing this drop in temperature, right? There's got to be some reason behind it. Maybe it is ghosts. I don't care. It doesn't matter. So that's all pretty good. We spent a lot of time with them like doing this kind of stuff and triangulating stuff, and eventually they're like doing maths and everything, and they finally get down to the exact longitude and latitude of where the petrification ray began in Brazil, and that's where they're going to go next. And they're like, get excited. And that wraps up episode 13. episode 13 kicks off with the team talking, kind of giving us the lowdown about what's going on and whatnot. So Stanley is racing towards them, and they are racing towards the upper Amazon River, as that's where they discovered well, that's where they calculated the source of the petrification rate that takes over the whole world, right? So they're talking about that, and they're talking about how like the fastest way might be to get off and go through like the Amazon forest, but then they talk about all the dangers that come with that, and how land travel is like really bad, right? Because all the bugs and animals and like all the sketchy stuff in the rainforest and whatnot, especially after like 30,000 years or however long it's been. It may only been like 3,000 years. Anyway, and so Senku's like, okay, cool, we'll just go around the horn of, not the Horn of Africa, but like the bottom of the like Argentina and stuff, kind of go around the continent, go around. But then they talk about how they don't have enough fuel to keep like pace with Stanley and his crew, and Stanley and his crew have all that petroleum, or all the kind of like the corn fuel, the ethanol fuel or whatever, that's stocked up in their giant like carrier, and that they'll be able to crush through. So the only thing they can do, they have to like pull over periodically and cut wood to make charcoal, and then they can use the charcoal as like the fuel for the ship. So like, okay, that's gonna fuck them over. So anyway, so they make their first stop, and they're cutting wood and cutting wood and cutting wood, and then Taiju's like out there all night because he has like in the indomitable spirit or whatever, and Seika, the watermelon chick, she and goes out to give him food, and they see this like crazy lettering in the sky that says hell, and they're like, oh no. So they run back, and they're like, oh, there's someone's using like glow-in-the-dark paint. So they go track down this like giant pumpkin house that's hanging in the sky, or it's not a pumpkin house, it's a giant like house hanging in the sky. And then this woman pops out, and she's in a pumpkin like Seika, and she has like squinched up face because she can't see. She needs glasses as well. So they get her glasses, and then Zeno's like, oh hey, this chick is like the best geographer in the whole world, and she was with us at like the dinner in California or whatever, and so but we lost track of her. And then she tells her story about how she woke up, she was in a pumpkin patch, and then she couldn't see anything, and so she put like a pumpkin on because she had no clothes, and then she headed to the ocean, and then she headed south because that was the smartest place to go for like resources and safety and whatnot. And that's because she has like eidetic memory or whatever about geography and whatnot. And then Zeno's like, did you not see the signs we left saying to go north? And she's like, what signs? And it's because she couldn't see, obviously. So they get her glasses, and then they talk about if there's a way to like go over land, and she identifies this route where they can climb some mountains, and then once they get over the mountains, they'll hit like the Amazon like right there, and so it's going to be super fast and whatnot. But they're, then the dilemma is like their little vehicle that they have, how they can't take that over the mountains. So what are they going to do instead? They're going to build motorcycles. So to build motorcycles, they're going to have to get rubber. And so she can identify where rubber's at, but then all of a sudden, bow and arrow guy who has like super sensitive hearing is like, oh no, they're about to catch up with us. And like, who's about to catch up with Stanley and crew? And that's because they have sonar, and then he can hear their sonar because his hearing is so good, and he can kind of backtrack it with that. So he checks the sonar, and then we go and we find out that one of the guys that is in Stanley's crew that survived like the thing is like one of the military's top like sonar people. So now we have like the battle of sonar people, but the guy's like, it's not no, that's not how this works. It's just they're gonna hunt us down and trap us. And that's because they have to keep pulling over for wood and whatnot. At some juncture around that time, they're talking about like what they could possibly do, and it's like, if only we had sails, we'd be able to keep ahead without pulling over all the time, because we just utilize wind power, right, to move them along. And it's like, too bad we don't have Taiju's like girlfriend, I can't remember her name is, to create a bunch of cloth for them and whatnot. And then they get back to the ship while they're talking about it, and then the geography lady's like, ta-da! I brought the kites, and they have tons of cloth, and I know how to sew it all together because that's what I've been doing all this time. And so they can make a giant sail. And then we hop back over to Stanley and stuff, and then we see Coward like watching them, and he's going to take him back to his cell when the sonar guy's like, oh fuck, we're screwed. And Stanley's like, what's wrong? And he's like, they're going super fast, like we're not going to catch up with them, it's like impossible at this juncture. And it's like, well, how are they going so fast all of a sudden? And then someone's like, did they make a sailboat? And it's like, fuck. And they did. And then we get like a whole conversation with Zeno and Senku about the sails, and like you making a kite sail, and how like the size of the sail versus the size of the ship, like you can make a sail that's like twice the size of the ship, and it'll make you go 4 times as fast or something because of magic. Like science magic. And so like, all right, cool. So now they're going to go to the place where they can get rubber, and they're going to build their motorcycles, and they're going to head over, and it's like, hooray, we solved this problem really quick. Cool. Dope. So now the team's got a plan. They know where to go. We know where to get a rubber, we get a motorcycles, head into Ecuador, all this stuff. But they're still being chased by Stanley, and they're very on top of them. So there's a discussion about what to do next. That the guy, a sonar guy recognizes that they have a sonar guy on the other team, and that is going to be a main problem because there's no way to like disrupt that per se, because no matter what, he's going to hear every signal that they do. And then he comes up with this genius idea, and then at the same time Senku comes up with an idea, and they all have like a chit chat. So what they're going to do, we learn about the Panama Canal. If you don't know, Panama Canal connects the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans through the country of Panama, right? They talk about how that is, there's going to be two teams. They're going to split up the crew. Half of them, or like one team is going to go to the Panama Canal to try to like, as like a distraction essentially, and that Stanley and his team is going to destroy them. And then their team's going to go get rubber from like this place that geography lady like figured out. And so then there's like this ridiculous scene where everyone's like, half the team's like crying and super sad and like, oh, how could you do this? How could we do this to one of the teams? They're going to be destroyed. What are we doing? And then we find out the team is just like, they set up the little car as like a drone essentially and put a bunch of shit in it so it makes a lot of noise, and then sent it to the Panama Canal. And then they talk about how because of the nature of the canal and like the aircraft carrier that Stanley's appropriated and their ship, that there's Stanley, even if he believes it's a feint, he has to go check it out, because just in case it's not and people are trying to escape that direction, and they can escape, then that makes it impossible for them to follow. So, it's one of those situations where it's like, all right, I have two choices. If I go this way, it could be a trap, but then I can always turn around and go the other way. But if I go that way and it's not a trap or it's not a trick, then I lose them forever. So, like, strategically speaking, they know that Stanley's going to go with that. So they, Stanley and his crew like head off that direction. Meanwhile, Senku and his crew, they find the area with the rubber trees, and then they get the rubber, and then we get like the science lesson about rubber and about heat and mixing silver and all this kind of crazy shit that makes like tires the way they are. And they make the tires, and then they're making them on the ship while they're traveling, and then they start constructing the bikes and the frames and everything, and they get them up to and then they finally like land in Ecuador, and it's all desert, like 30,000 years or 3,000 years or whatever it was. So they're I think it's just supposed to be 3,000 years. I don't know. Yeah. So then the desert's all over the place, and they're like, oh, this sucks. And it's like, oh, no, this is actually good. It'll be easier to like get through here, except we have no cover, so that's going to be a problem. So we have to hurry. So then we have like the race against time, as we do in the show. And they're building the bikes, tearing the ship apart, using the rubber, all that kind of stuff. Meanwhile, Stanley discovers the false ship, and so they turn around and speed as fast as they can. And after a few days, they show up, and they all hop off, and they got their guns, and they're like ready to go. But then the motorcycles are done, and the motorcycles burst out of there. And they're racing, and so then Stanley and crew, they start like firing on him with their machine guns, and Senku or Ryu and what was his name, Carlos, I think, they are excellent drivers, so they start making like a smoke screen, and then Stanley like runs up to the top of this like dune or cliff or whatever, and he takes some pot shots, and there's a whole thing where a spear guy has Zeno, and then Spear guy like puts Zeno behind after Zeno's like, oh, maybe you should use the hostage to make sure that they can take their shots or whatever, or that it distracts them from shooting, which is a good idea. But at the same time, the Spear guy's like, he's very unconcerned about this whole situation. This is probably not going to turn out great. So once the smoke screen goes up, they stop shooting because they don't want to shoot Zeno, and then Stanley gets up and he fires, but he doesn't fire at, he's not going for like headshots or kill shots necessarily, because he can't because of the smoke screen or whatever, but he is able to fire at Tsukasa and Spear Guy and get them like in their arms. And it's not like a serious wound necessarily, but can cause problems later down the road. And then someone thinks about how that is a thing that he did on purpose to kind of make their jobs harder. And we also see that they had like back plates, so some of the bullets like pinged off those as like a defense against bullets. Okay. Lastly, Stanley, or not, lastly, Zeno, or Stanley is like, Zeno's on the back of that bike, he's definitely going to find a way to like send me a message. So he starts looking, and then Zeno uses Morse code with his eye blinks, to send Stanley a message. We don't find out exactly what that message is. And then the rest of the crew, there was one more thing. And so there's a plane on the aircraft carrier, and so they take off to like get them from the sky, and then the plane like crashes, because when Senku and Ryu were having the dogfight with the girl who was pretending to be Stanley, and they crashed her or whatever, Senku went over there knowing that they were going to just repair the plane and take it with them, and he put a bunch of sugar water in the gas tank, knowing that sugar water is not going to like destroy, as soon as you start the engine, it doesn't like not work. It's after like a little bit of time, so they can do like the pre-flight checks, and they can get into the air, and then once in the air, it'll like crash. And so the two guys that were flying the plane, they like crashed the shit out in the desert, and then Senku and crew like head off to find the source of the stone of the petrification, right? And that wraps up episode. What episode was this? Like 15? Anyway, it wraps up this episode. All right, episode 16, the race is on again. So this time the race is, the dudes on the motorcycle are going, Stanley's trying to fix his plane so he can chase after them, but if Senku and crew can get to the Amazon rainforest, then they're going to have cover. But to do that, they got to go get over the Andes Mountains. And so Stanley's working with Engineer Bro back in California to try to fix the plane, right? Because he just brought warriors and shit. So they're working on that. They're using an unencrypted radio just to kind of, speed the process up as fast as possible. Meanwhile, Senku reaches out to journalist lady and her crew, Muscle Mama, and they are going. He has them go to. They're gonna capture the Medusa item that turns everyone to stone, which is lost under the water, and then they're gonna take it apart and fix it essentially. And so we get one of the girls who hasn't had much screen time. She's like a super swimmer, I guess. She goes into water, picks it up, gets it to him, and then they're trying to figure out what to do. And they're like, I don't know, we need to figure out something. And then Ryu at some point is like, there's a Rolex manufacturer right near the Los Angeles airport, I guess, LAX. I assume that's kind of where they're at. Maybe San Francisco. I don't think it ever really established where in California they're at. Anyway, and so they're like, oh, too bad we don't know exactly where that's at, and things could have changed and whatnot. And so Geography Lady's like, describe it to me. And so he kind of tells her from the airport where it'd be, and she draws a perfect map of it. But now they got to convey this map back to the other crew so they can go find the Rolex lady or CEO so that she can get a watchmaker, the world's best watchmaker essentially. It's how the show works. And then they can use him to intricately figure out how the mechanism is put together, and that way you can fix it, because the Medusa is kind of like a super advanced watch, right? Okay, so to do that they have to fax machine, so they develop this grid system, and they use Morse code to perfectly quote unquote fax over the information so it can be reconstructed, but it's all humans. So it's we got Taiju's girlfriend, I can't remember her name, and then Gen spending a whole day or 2 days just Morse coding this map over, and then they go find the Rolex CEO. They unstone her. She's like, ta-da! Oh, you want the best watchmaker that's ever existed? He's over there. And so they get him, and he's another creepoid, because his whole thing is that he's super arrogant and cocky and violent in the way he speaks to men, but that he's never spoken to a woman before. So a second woman touches his arm or asks him something, he completely breaks down and is unable to function. Anyway, so they get him the Medusa device. He goes off in the corner and is messing with it, and he's thinking about it and being holy cow, this is made of some crazy glass, or very kind of glass metal or something, where it's it can transmit all this stuff, and he's pulling stuff out, and he's kind of messing with it, and he finally finds that it's powered by a diamond. So he pulls the diamond out, and he pulls the diamond out and then cleans it up and then puts it back in there. And then he remembers Muscle Mama being like, hey, this thing's going to turn people to stone. This is how you activate it. Don't tell anyone. And also don't use it. And so he's like, YOLO. So he uses it on himself and stones himself, but then that burns out the diamond, I guess, because it only had one charge left after he kind of fixed it up. And so it's okay, well, now they know how it works somewhat. So they just got to figure it out or replace it or do something, right? And so they talk about that, and then they get back to Senku and crew. And at some point, I think Francois is we need to redistribute people. No. Wait, no, yeah. So Geography Lady's hey, we need to redistribute people, because they're talking about geography. They're talking about how rain comes from a certain direction, and El Nino, and how climates have changed, but it's predictable how they would change. And this lady can calculate it, because she doesn't just know geography. She knows human geography, right? Which is how humans interact with the environment as well. It's a whole thing. Anyway, so she talks about how they essentially the tilt of the Earth and the equator and all this stuff. And so then Senku creates a weighing device based on a 1 kilo, or a 10 inch by 10 inch by 10 inch thing of water, which weighs a kilogram or something. That might not be exactly right, but he creates some sort of weighing device, and then he gets everyone weighed, and they reset up on the bike so they can use them more, and then they're going, and eventually they get to the mountains, to really steep mountains, and they can't get the bikes up anymore. And so someone's like, oh no, we're gonna be stuck, and Stanley's doing something, and then Senko's like, yeah, right about now Stanley should be done fixing the plane. So what are we going to do? We're going to build a gondola system. And so we jump back to Stanley, and he's like, let's fly this motherfucker. And then we see the plane going to take off, and then Senku and crew start their gondola experience. It's the fuck. All right, time to build this gondola. So they knock it out pretty quick. Kohaku like leaps across this giant gorge. Arrow guy shoots a thing, and then they carry a cable across and construct the whole thing with like motorcycle parts and whatnot. And then they do the calculations because the metal rope can only carry like so much. So I think it was like 160 kilograms, which is like 300 something pounds, I want to say. And so they got to calculate like bringing parts across and carrying people across and all this stuff and doing all that. But then there's like a whole discussion about what they call it, the river dilemma or whatever, which is the idea that like, okay, you have to move like 3 things across a river, but like one of the things will like eat the other thing if you leave it alone. And then it's even more complicated because I guess it's like, and if you leave something else alone, it will also eat the other thing. And so people get concerned about Zenu and Spear Guy. What was his name? Anyway, because there's like a history, right? And so we get like a recap of the history with like Spear Guy killing Tsukasa and Senku killing Tsukasa and Tsukasa trying to kill Senku and yada, 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 right? All this stuff. And so like the concern is Zeno and Spear Guy might join forces if you leave them alone together. But they do the calculations, and the only way to get Zeno across with like a warrior so that he can't like fight back is to go with Spear Guy, because you have Spear Guy who's the lightest, and you have Taiju and Tsukasa. So they do that, and Kohaku's gonna like help maintain order on the other side, but then a little girl with the like eyesight girl, she like falls off the gondola, and so Kohaku has to go rescue her, and then there's like a concern that Spear Guy's gonna do something, and he just like helps them, and then everyone's like super happy that like they've shared so much history over the last like years that they've kind of like, you know, they've kind of come, the Kingdom of Science, quote unquote, has like come to terms with like their situation and like allied themselves up and feel good about like what's going on. So that's nice. So they get over the Andes, and then there's the rainforest, and so then they get in there and they get their bikes and they make them look like they can go on water or whatever. And then they head inside the jungle and use the cover and all that stuff. So the plane with Stanley and his radar guy, they're flying over and they're like, okay, yeah, they made the jungle. And Stanley's like, yeah, I figured they would do it. But the most important thing is like we can look down there and find the tire tracks so we can see what direction they're heading into, because the expectation is that they're going to be so hurried because of Stanley's like pressure that they're not going to like do a lot to like hide their tracks or have a decoy or anything at this point. They're going to kind of just like run with it, which is, he's right. And so then now that he knows where they're going somehow, that he's going to head back to the carrier and they're going to like sail that direction. Okay, so then we just get some like fun jungle antics about like army ants, and how they're the most dangerous creature in the Amazon forest, and just like keeping bugs away, and bugs and like mosquitoes are like the thing that's going to kill you in the Amazon rainforest. And we see like sloths and shit while they're like going around. They also make rubber boots for everybody so they don't get bitten while they're walking through like the river or the grass with like ticks or leeches or any of that kind of stuff. So things are going pretty smoothly. They make like a what do you call it? They make like an anti-bug thing using, or an anti-like creature thing, generally just making, they capture a bunch of army ants and then they like fry them up with some alcohol so that this like tonic creates like a smell like the army ants, and then they give that to everybody so it kind of pushes everybody off. And then it's like, we see like, okay, so they're headed over, Stanley's sailing, we see the guy working on the Medusa back at the headquarters, and we see Muscle Mama, who's like the Japanese representative, counting down like a calendar, and it's like days or weeks go by, it seems. And then we kind of get like, you know, it's been 4 months since we left Japan, and we're finally getting closer to like the location, like we're in Brazil now, or what used to be Brazil, and we're going to we're finally like almost at the place where this happened. And then while they're traveling on the river, because at some point they just make rafts and they're going down the Amazonian River, what's his name? Assistant kid like comes up with this idea where he's like, oh hey, we can create a contraption that like if we get stoned, it'll automatically kick in and then unstone you. And then somebody's like, well yeah, or I think Senku's like, well, if you think like this Mr. Y, who's like up on the moon, was just gonna like use one blast, you don't understand his like genius, right? Because obviously he would send multiple blasts. So even if you have this automatic system kick in to de-stone you, like you're still gonna get stoned. And that's probably what happened the first time, in case like somebody got missed or something random happened. It just kept stoning stuff. And then as they disembark from their rafts and they're kind of like walking along a small like tributary, the eye girl, the little watermelon head, she sees one of the Medusas, and she's like, oh hey look, I found one. And it's like, wow, that's so lucky, we just found one already. And then someone looks up and they're like, I don't know if it's so lucky. And then everyone looks up and there's like a ziggurat of fucking Medusas, like this huge edifice, like in fucking Blade Runner, like that fucking God, what's that guy's name? the big like crazy looking science fiction building in like the Blade Runner movies, Endgame. That you're like, what the fuck is this? But it's all made of like Medusas, and they're like, holy shit, this is a nightmare. So the diamond, or not the diamonds, there's diamonds in these fucking things, and Medusas is what they call them. So this giant like ziggurat of Medusas, not a single one is active. They're all not working. But they have a whole bunch of them, so then they just gather them up and they'll smash them and kind of examine them and kind of figure out what powers them and whatnot. Because they're all useless right now, but before they couldn't really like examine it too much, especially without like the clockmaker. Because if they broke it, they'd have no way to examine it. But now they have like thousands of them essentially. And then they kind of talk about that, they deal with that, they smash them up a little bit. We jump over to Stanley and crew, and they're going around the Cape, right, all the way down past Patagonia or Argentina or whatever, to come back around. And they're talking about how, like, they know that they're on the Amazon River, and the only way out of the Amazonian River is to build a ship and take the Amazon River out to the Atlantic Ocean. So that's where they're going to head. And even though it's going to take them a while, they'll be able to get there. And then once they get over there, they'll be able to use the radar to detect them because there's, like, no other ships in the ocean, right? So, it doesn't matter that they're out there. It doesn't matter, they don't know exactly where they're at because the radar will tell them, and this guy's like a radar, the radar expert is going to use like science, the eye of science, as he says, to figure out where they're at. Jumping back, we see them, they're building a boat, right, and they're trying to work on this thing, and the boat looks totally different than before, and they're kind of chatting about it, and we find out that they're trying to put together like a stealth boat, but no one really knows how to do that. Like bow and arrow guy, who's also like a radar guy who works for the military, he didn't have access to that kind of like information. And Zeno may or may not have had that information, but he's not going to reveal it, right? Because he wants to be like rescued by Stanley. He doesn't care about like sticking around with these guys necessarily. He's very much like a frenemy. So they're building that, and then they're working on like rubber, and the design of the ship's going to be like angled in certain ways. And the whole point is they're trying to like use science to figure out how to construct like a ship that cannot be detected by radar. And so they try, and it gets like a little bit better, but it's not really working. And then Zeno and Senku, someone starts talking about the Medusas and how it's interesting that like no one was able to detect these things falling from the sky because like, NASA has all this equipment and all these other places where they can detect like even like a small asteroid or meteorite that comes into the stratosphere or whatever. But like no one detected any of these, and there were obviously like millions of them or something. So that's odd. And they're like, oh, wait a second, maybe it's the design, maybe it's something about the setup or whatever. And so they take the Medusa and they hang it, and then they try to detect it with radar, and they cannot, because something about like the way it's designed or whatever makes it immune to radar. So they cover the whole ship in Medusas, and then the cure-all essentially for the show. And they're like, all right, cool. So now the ship is immune to radar, and so when they finish up and they have like bags of Medusas and they head on their way. So now they got a whole bunch of bags. They're gonna like smash them up, and Senku is gonna like dissect them and try to figure out what all the parts do and how everything relates to each other. And he's building like a whole thing, try to like reverse engineer the technology. And Zeno's joining him too, and they have like a funny conversation about like how Zeno, if he figures out what's going on, he's obviously not going to tell Senku. And Senku's like, I don't give a fuck, I'm going to tell you everything, because I just, that's all I care about is like progressing technology and science and whatnot. So they're working. They find a bunch of these little diamonds, and they're trying to figure out what the difference between the diamonds are, because some diamonds are like scorched while other diamonds are not. And it seems like the ones that are not scorched are they weren't like made correctly, or they weren't like pure enough or whatever, so they didn't set off the Medusa. So Medusa essentially in itself is broken, and then the ones that are like scorched are like the energy conduit or whatever, like it kind of broke them. So it's like, okay, so the solution is that we need to create a diamond. So how are they going to create a diamond? Well, they call back to like the crew back at like the Joint Base America. And they're like, he's describing to them how they gotta make diamonds, and he's like, hey, you gotta get alcohol and you gotta heat it up so that it like burns off into like carbon, and then you keep burning it off, and eventually like like coal, right? And then the coal you get it hot enough, it will transform into diamonds, right? That's like the process of diamonds. I don't know how the alcohol, they didn't really explain that, and I'm not like a physicist or whatever, or chemist or something. But I do know that's how diamonds are like created. It's just like the pressure and being cooked long enough, these like chunks of carbon, which are coal, that's what coal is, be eventually like, turned into this like stone that we use as diamond that is like super sharp, and it's kind of like a conduit. I feel like from what I remember, gold is like much better as like a conduit. But anyway. And it's like, okay, so then they have like a whole process where they like blow up, and then they like almost blow up again, and things don't work, and they're like, we're a bunch of idiots, because they are like, the smartest one there is Taiju's girlfriend, but she's like, you know, she's super smart. She's like autistically smart when it comes to like cloth and doing things with like crafts, but like constructing diamonds is like only the matter. And then you got like dumb spear guy, you got like dumb original bad guy, and you got like muscle mama, and then you got like journalist. Like none of these people are like engineers or scientists by any stretch of the imagination, but they don't want to give this information to the Americans, who had like the engineer guy, the black guy. So they work, and then, you know, eventually they're able to create diamonds, and then they show it to the clock guy, and he's like, yes, this will work. And it's like, yay, we did it. Man, this show's so fucking excellent. Anyway, so now that we have our stealth ship and Stanley's doing his thing and all that stuff, it's a race. Well, first of all, we spent some time with Stanley, and he's kind of trying to figure out what's going on. And Senku tells everybody that, like, he doesn't say this immediately, but they start talking about how they got to get diamonds. And so the home base in California, like, made the artificial diamonds, right? The synthetic diamonds, but they're not big enough to fit inside the Medusa. So what are they going to do? They got to find real diamonds. Fortunately, Geography Lady knows where real diamonds are. And so they're able to send out like a crew in California to like start tracking down these real diamonds so that they can start crafting them. And then the watchmaker can kind of start working with the Medusa to try to get it to function correctly. And while they're all doing that, we get like a little talk about how synthetic diamonds are stronger than real diamonds, and so you use synthetic diamonds to kind of carve down or like sandpaper real diamonds so that they look like the little diamonds that go in people's like engagement rings and stuff, right? Like instead of just being like a rock, they like polish them and smooth them and whatnot. And so then they do that, they're able to get the diamonds, everything works out. So now what? So Senku and crew, they talk about how like, okay, they're gonna go and they're gonna do the same thing, but they have to cut off communication with the radio because since they're in a stealth ship, the radar's not gonna track them. But if they send out radio signals, then that's also going to it's gonna be able to be picked up on sonar, and they're gonna be able to track them. So they're not gonna do that. So they're cut off communications, and they're doing that and sending stuff, and they're gonna like cut it off for good. But while that happens, Zeno like gets some of the wire around one of his like little metal finger thingies. I haven't really mentioned, but they're crazy looking. And then he creates like a signal, and then Senko notices that his claws have become like magnetized because he's rubbing them against this wire, and so he kind of figures out this guy sent a message. And so we hop over to Stanley, and the radar guy's like, "There's some like weird signal. I don't know what it is. It's like really scratchy and kind of odd." And then Stanley's like, "It's a message from Zeno, something about like we're not gonna be able to track the ship, probably a stealth ship or like all these other options. So like now what?" Because right, like Stanley's like a super genius when it comes to like tactics and combat. And so he's recalling the message that Zeno sent him through blinking with Morse code when they were far away. And it's go to it's like a Brazilian city where there's a lot of mineral deposits nearby. It's like they said it like 3 times. It's like Afuea. Artusa maybe. Anyway, whatever. So they're like, okay, fuck tracking this ship. We're gonna get there as fast as humanly possible. So we're gonna try to beat them over there. Meanwhile, Senku acknowledges to everybody that Zeno sent a message to Stanley. So now they're in a race. So they gotta go. They're gonna take a shortcut instead of like going around to get to the city. They're gonna like go down cliffs and elevator shit and whatever. So they get over there and they start building like a literal fucking city. It's baller. With like a tower in the middle and like houses and everything. So they're building a home while they're also like digging up their own diamonds, and they're processing those diamonds. And then an engineer boy, the old man, and Chrome and everybody are like making these diamonds and try to crack open these Medusas. And so after a while of failure, the engineer is finally able to like open one of these Medusas up to get to like the battery, right? So now they're going to try the diamonds. But the diamonds aren't working, and then Watch Guy's not having any luck either. They're both not they're crafting diamonds that would fit perfectly in there, but for some reason it's not working. And so they're talking about that and going back and forth. And finally, like, old man has like a revelation that the diamonds are not perfect. They're purposely flawed to have like a crack in the middle, so that we get some like flashbacks to like previous discussions about the diamonds, and like Kohaku and even Zeno mentioned that like there's cracks in these things, which is odd. But the cracks are on purpose because the cracks are, we don't know why, but if the old man can somehow craft a diamond that's like with these cracks but still functional and like perfect in every other way and all that good stuff, then that will work for the Medusa. And then they set up a whole system because they're like, well, we can set up traps, but likely we're only going to get like one Medusa to work because it took like weeks for them to even crack like one open. And so, okay, well, we could use bow and arrow guy, and it's like, well, that's the first person they're going to kill, and like they're obviously going to snipe, so like why would they're not even going to get close? And it's like, okay, so what if we create like a kamikaze attack? Like Taiju's like, I'll just run at him and scream, and they're like, bro, they're going to shoot you in the head. He's like, I'll power through the bullets, and then the stone thing will heal me. And he's like, or you'll get a headshot and you'll die. And he's like, okay, fair. So, but then Chrome is like, oh wait, I have a good idea. We can still do that. We'll just like have it be set up as a trap, so we'll like lure them in, and when they start firing, we'll just stone everybody, including themselves, for like 300 meters, which is like 9,000 feet, which is like a mile or two, right? What's 3 kilometers? Yeah, it's almost 2 miles. So that, the sniper can't shoot more than 2, but there's no fucking way. These like janky ass weapons that they're creating with like Stone Age technology. But like your average like sniper is going to be able to hit like 1,000 yards or 1,000 meters. So 3,000 is like more than enough to like encapsulate everybody. And with the idea that they're going to leave like a little girl like 2 miles out essentially. So with curing fluid and everything, just kind of like relaxing. So when everyone gets stoned, she can like come back and unstone people. So that's the game plan. So obviously there's going to be complications, but we'll see. I've never seen this season before, so I honestly don't know what happens. But I've seen enough of the show to know how like there's always like some sort of complication, and then Senku has to like save the day at the end because he's the shonen protagonist of the shonen battle anime. That is, it's so fucking good. I love that they took this genre and like turned it into like science stuff. It's so goddamn good. Anyway, so then they have like a whole speech and fun music about like Stanley's in like little boats trying to come in here like Vietnam and snipe everything, and then Senku and everybody's working on the diamond, and he's like, it's a race, so like Stanley gets there before they get the Medusa set up, then they're fucked. But if they can get the Medusa first, then they should win that battle. And then I'm excited to see where the complications go here going forward. In episode 19, we pick up immediately where we left off with a recap of the plan. The plan is to draw Stanley and his crew inside, do a trap, send Suika, who's the watermelon girl, off to kind of hide out and hold off with the restorative solution so that she can come back and bring everybody back to life, and then they can kind of figure out what to do and keep going from there. All right, cool. So Francois is actually going to go with her to kind of help her keep her safe, protect her, and so they all head off. And as soon as Suika and Francois are talking about like water and talking about food drops and all that stuff, they see Stanley, and Stanley and his crew have landed nearby, and they're headed into the thing. And they got Samurai Guy and they got Coward, right? So they're going along, moving along, and then the girl who is part of the Special Forces team, she gets bitten by like a poisonous spider that's going to like kill her. And so Francois and Suika think about how they're Senku sent them with like a cure-all for the spider bite, and that if they just do this, it'll like vaso-unconstrict the blood vessels so that a person can live, so they can keep breathing. So Suiku sacrifices the plan to go help this woman because, it's a shonen anime, and so the good guys always do the right thing. And so she heads off, she does that. Because of that, she gets caught, and then Francois notices that they're not killing Suika, and that because there's a whole thing where she's like trying to escape, and they're like firing on her, and then Francois goes to help, and she has like a paring knife, and she throws it to Samurai Guy because she has no combat capabilities whatsoever, and he's able to free Coward, and then Coward is like super strong because he was like a guard for years, like the Stone Age. So he just clobbers a bunch of the Special Forces guys, and then Stanley comes up, and he doesn't kill Samurai and the other guy, and then Francois starts putting this whole thing together, and she realizes that Stanley is doing everything like exactly like a military operation, which is something that Zeno and Senku had a conversation about earlier, which is that Stanley, because Zeno's like, Stanley's gonna come and kill all of you to like rescue his leader, and it's like nothing against you guys, or it's just like that's how he operates. He's in the military. He's 100% like the best military guy of all time or whatever. So like his operation is to rescue Zeno, and to rescue Zeno, he's gonna kill everybody to establish like safety. And so there's like completely passionless combat, right? Okay, so at that juncture, Francoise also put that together, and so she comes out and surrenders her and Suika as the like hostages, essentially, saying that they're not part of the combat squad and all this stuff, and that Suiko actually is a nurse / I think she calls her a doctor, actually, so a doctor, and that she healed their friend, the other woman, to prove the point. And then the radar guy is like, they just sent out a communications, and she's like, Francois's like, that's correct, you can check exactly what I said, the communications that our party got split in two. And then they do that, and we go back to Senku and stuff, and it's like, that's a weird message, but the message is important because it teaches Senku and crew where they're at. And when they find out, when the geography lady figures out exactly where like Stanley and them are coming in, that gives them a slight advantage, right? Because now they have more information. Kohaku like immediately like runs off. And she gets there, she's like examining, she's trying to find weak points, but like, you know, these guys are all special forces dudes, and so they have like a perfectly set up like situation where they're guarding every angle, and she's like, there's no way I can beat all these guys. And then Tsukasa and what's that guy's name? The spear guy, Gilm? I can't remember. Anyway, so Spear Guy, they show up and they're like, oh good, we're glad you didn't do something. They talk about war, and they talk about modern warfare, and they talk about how like the most important thing that they could do right now is get them distracted and then destroy their communications. And then they talk about like the only reason, like you gotta look at it from like a military perspective, right? Like the reason they haven't killed these guys is because they're using them as hostages, but at the same time, the reason why we don't kill Zenu or do anything to Zenu is because if we do something to Zenu, then like our hostage is gone, and so they're gonna kill all of their hostages, which include all the people like Taiju's girlfriend back in like the community with the engineer and stuff, right? Because they're operating like a war, like a modern day war, where it's all like and not like stupid American or stupid modern day war, like a modern day warfare as it should be conducted, like passionless kind of war, like you do in video games, right? Which is very efficient. Okay. And so they pull out one of like the radios, and they have like the sound effect of like a bullet going off, and so they set it to like repeat, so it sounds like a machine gun's going off, and then that gets Stanley and his crew to operate in like under fire, small arms fire, which if you've ever been in like basic training in the Marine Corps or the Army, you've done this drill like 5,000 times. Because I'm watching it and I'm like, oh, this guy looked up like the field manual. It's exactly how you would do it. And so in that, they're gonna like sneak past them and go hit the communications guy, but the Maya, who's like the muscle mama, who is like an ultimate martial artist like Tsukasa, she like senses them, so she goes, and so it's like, all right, we gotta fight, and they're like, all right, we're all gonna die, and so Tsukasa like tears off his fucking thing with his rippling body, and then Spear Guy rips off his cape with like his rippling body, and the Kohaku's like, let's do this. And so they go and they start just beating the crap out of these dudes, and then Maya almost gets Kohaku, but then Tsukasa stops it, and then they fight, and to see who's the best martial artist, and Tsukasa's the best martial artist, he kicks the shit out of her, but then he gets shot because they got fucking guns, right? They're not gonna like not use them. And then Kohaku's like running, and then she's about to get shot, but then Spear Guy jumps in front of the way, he takes a bunch of shots, and then he grabs Stanley's gun so that he can't like hit Kohaku, and Kohaku takes off, and then she smashes the communication device that they have, the radio, so that's going to put a big delay on them like communicating back, which makes their situation, they can't just like charge in, because if they charge in and they kill Zeno, then it like defeats the purpose, right? And they're military, so they're going to like wait and like get that situation figured out, so now they got to waste time like fixing this thing and all this stuff, and then Kohaku gets like shot too, and then right, so like mission accomplished, and then Stanley's like, I see what you're really trying to do there. And then we get like a funny scene where Gen is like carrying a bunch of like stuff, and he drops one, and then he picks it up, and he's like, oh, that feels weird. And then him and Ryu talk for a second. Then we head back, and then it's like the credits start to roll, but they roll in like the sad way that like we've lost friends, right? Because it's like sad shown in anime stuff. And so we go back, and Tsukasa's like not dead yet. He's just shot up real good. And so he's thinking about how he got saved before by Senku, and how like if he can just hold on, he knows that Senku can save him again, because he believes that he'll reproduce the Medusa and be able to use it to stone him, and like maybe it can even bring back the dead, is what he says, like his sister, right, who thought was dead. And so he looks over and he sees Kohaku is also barely holding on, but she's still alive, but then Spear Guy is like fucking dead. And there was a minute when Spear Guy has like this thought, he's like, I always knew that fighting with you, thinking about Kohaku and Tsukasa was the greatest thing that I'd ever accomplished in my life. It's like, fuck yeah, show. Like fucking good. So Tsukasa, it's literally like Tsukasa is leaning against like a tree, and it's like it's not raining, but it looks like it's about to rain, kind of thing. Which it's an episode rainforest, rains all the fucking time. And then Kohaku's like laying there, like, and that's where and then Tsukasa's like, I can't believe like I tried to destroy science, but now I'm completely. It's like I have a total faith and belief in Senku and his science. And he's like, what a world. And that's our episode 11. It's or episode 19. Baller as shit. We pick up with Kohaku thinking about how she's dying. She doesn't feel alone because she's got her friends, right? And she's looking at Spear Bro and Tsukasa, and then she's thinking about the Kingdom of Science stuff, and then we get the opening credits. And then from there, we go back to... we see Stanley and crew. They're kind of talking about the communications, and they got to stick around and fix the communications. And then Stanley's like, no, my soldier instinct is telling me we have to go now. And that's because Chrome and Old Man are having a real difficult time getting the diamond thing figured out for the Medusa, right? They're just trying, but they can't do it. And so they kind of figure out that Kohaku, Tsukasa, and them are not coming back, and then also they know that Francois and Suika have been captured, so they got to send somebody else out with the petrification stuff. So they send out Geography Lady and what's her fuck, the beautiful lady, right? And then Carlos and his homie have like an incredibly short argument about going out with her or not. But they go out, and then Geology Lady has like a real breakdown cry because she knows it's like there's no way they're gonna fix the Medusa to be able to freeze everyone in time and all that stuff. And so her and is her name Lily? I think. The beautiful doctor lady are like, they have like a good cry out and everything. And then we hop back over, and Stanley's finally, the sonar guy with the bow, he's not seen. He hears them coming up, and they're like charging. They charge the base. They're bam, 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 bam. Taiju tries to like defend the base, and then he gets blown up. And then Ryu and Zenu are like chit-chatting about what their belief system is and whatnot. And Zenu's like, well, if you guys surrender, maybe I can get you some mercy. And Ryu's like, we don't need your mercy. We're gonna win. And then he gets shot. And then Gen's like freaking the fuck out. He pulls out like a white flag, and that gets shot. And then the whole area with the diamonds and stuff that's being worked on gets blown the fuck out with grenades and whatnot. And so it's just Senko, Chrome, and Old Man, and they're talking about how they failed and all this stuff. And then you get a radio broadcast from the watch guy, and he's done it. He's made the Medusa, and he put it in a glass, and he's like fucking around with it. And then he gets caught by engineer guy over there, the black guy, and they grab the Medusa. They surround everybody, and they get all the Kingdom of Science guys, and they're surrounding them, all the Americans, and they put it in like a big vault. And so then they get a message from Senku, and they're like, okay, we got a working one. We got to just freeze the whole fucking planet. Like, that's how this can work. We have all our friends are like dying, and the only way to save them is to, stone the whole planet once again. And like, how the fuck are you gonna do that? So the Kingdom of Science back in America, they make like a daring break, and they're just like beating the shit out of dudes and fighting dudes, and they're slowly getting like shot and killed. But then God, what's that guy's name? The big brawny guy who was like the bad guy in the first season, like Volcanus or something. He is able to like get it. Well, they get the key, and like everyone's got like a little star, like the gymnastics girl and like the two bad guys from like the third season that are no good guys and all that stuff. They're all like doing God's work. And then Glasses Bro with the spear and yada yada. And so they eventually get the vault open, right, with the key and everything, but then the guy gets shot before he can do anything, and then they're like, all right, we got them all, they're all dead, all dying. And then watch guy, who was like hiding under the bodies, he like leaps forward and reaches for the Medusa, and then the black guy is able to like slam the vault on his hand, like crushing it, but his hand with like the watch, which is like the receiver they've been using as like a telecommunications device, gets trapped inside. And then all of a sudden they hear like a radio buzz, and he's like, oh fuck, we got to go find, there's someone else around here who's going to be able to transmit. And they're like, no, we got them all. And then watch guy's like, you dummies, you haven't realized this message is coming from the gods. And if you remember, which I did not talk about at all in this season because it didn't come up, but in season 3, that I think it was season 3, they picked up a signal from the moon, and it's the voice of Senku, who is like the voice that set off the petrification device in like the first place. And it's just being continuously broadcast. That's like the mysterious Dr. Y or whatever up on the moon that they're trying to get to like stop the broadcast or figure out what's going on. And so, it's like that signal is picked up by the watch. And so it's inside the thing. And so it triggers off the Medusa to stone the whole fucking planet, right? And then we see Senku and Chrome and Old Man sitting there with Gen, and they're like, all right, we're doing this again. And guess we'll find out. There's like 3 episodes left, 4 episodes left in this series, right? How they like unpetrify and get to the moon and stuff. But yeah, so there you go. So just because the petrification ray is going off and stoning everybody doesn't mean the battle's over. In fact, what's his name? Stanley shoots a whole bunch more people before the day's through. So Senku and Chrome and Old Man and Gen are talking about what they can do to when they get petrified, like how, kind of like what Senku did before. We had the timing and everything, and he like threw the the vial up, and it crashed on him, so he was able to heal through it and whatnot. So they kind of talk about that, but then Senku gets shot, and so then he's laying there, and the bottle of revival fluid like crashes on the ground, right? So that's okay. We still got the others, right? So we see a shot of Lily and a geologist lady. I can't remember if there's anything. And she's like, I know what I'm going to do. Senku told me this story. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to throw it in the air, and when I get petrified, it's going to go. And she throws it right off the cliff, and she's like, no. And then they get petrified. And Sonar guy frees Francois, Suika, Coward, and Samurai guy. And so they got a bunch of revival fluids. They're going, but then Stanley, who has now rescued Zeno, and them, they run back because they're like, oh shit, they got the revival fluid there, and there's none here. So they go running back, and so there's a little battle there, and they like kill everybody there. Or no, shoot everybody, right? Because obviously it's a shonen anime, everyone's going to be okay at the end of the day. Well, maybe not Spear Guy, because some sacrifices are acceptable. And they're like, all right, we got it. And they open up the satchel, and there's like no revival fluid there, and it's like, the fuck? And they look over at the watermelon head that Suika uses as like her glasses, and there's she's not there. And so obviously she has all the vials, and she's running, and so they chase her down and they shoot her, but she's able to get like one vial and toss it up to like Chrome, who tosses it again, who tosses it to whoever else, and they get it like positioned at the top of this tower. And then Zeno's like, at this point, like everyone's getting stoned. It's like really close, and Zeno's like looking at it, and he's like, he has a final revelation that like, they had this whole thing to like set off the Medusa at the top of this tower and whatnot, but in reality that's not what the tower is for. The tower was to help revive this, if this like latchdis, they're like plans upon plans upon plans kind of situation. Like if everything else failed, this is how they would get it, because they would, there's no way to time what's going on, and they can't make it perfect, so someone's just sitting under there, and they have the revival fluid. Eventually the revival fluid will like break, and the liquid will like fall down upon whoever and revive them, and they can revive everybody else. And it should have been Senku, obviously, but it's not. And so, because Suika at this point is laying there, and Senku's like, Suika, you gotta go. You're the only one who can do this. Everyone else is held up, because like Gen and Chrome and Old Man are trying to fight back Stanley, who's trying to push through, and Zeno's just like standing there chatting with Senku about like, some old bullshit about science and the science future, and kind of like their goals and what there is. And then Senku makes like some commentary about like ruling the world or whatever being like a boring thing to do and like not the point. And then that kind of like, it seems like that kind of gets through to Zeno somewhat, but then they get stoned. And then Stanley, it's like the last man standing. He's standing right by the tower with his gun pointed at the revival fluid, and he's like, he's doing calculations right as a soldier, and he's like, if I shoot this thing, it may or may not like spin out and hit somebody that I'm familiar with, but it could also do nothing. And then humanity's like fucked. And then he's like still considering it, but then he's like, if I like, there's somebody's there to like get hit with this fluid. It's one of those funny things where it's like, well, why doesn't he just go in there? But probably because he doesn't know how to make the fluid and doesn't know what, so he's making these calculations, I assume. And he's kind of talking about, he's thinking about, has Zeno like his best friend forever, how they like kids and grow up together. And then he thinks about how like there's zero chance that they will not revive Zeno at this point, because he's such like, and then they're just going to use his statue as like a hostage, right? They're not going to do anything to his statue, because Zeno is, him and they're best friends, and he trusts like their friendship, because friendship is magic. And so he knows that no matter what, they will keep him around, and they'll protect Zeno, because they need Zeno to like accomplish everything they're doing. And so he just like tosses the gun aside and like holds out his arms, and he's like, fuck it. And like he gets turned to stone. And then like we see Suika's doggy, who's like a little puppy, and she's running around like the village back in the old neighborhood, trying to revive everybody, right? Because only humans got turned to stone for some reason that has yet to be explained. And then we just see like time go by, and Senku even makes some comment to Zeno. He's like, I'll see you maybe months or days or years, but we'll all be back. I trust science. Trust the science. And then and then Zeno's like, And so, we see this like passage of time that is like years, because we see a little puppy dog, and now it's like a big old Shinu Ibu. What is it? Shinu Ibu. No, that's not right. Inu. Inu's dog. Shiba Inu. With like, he's got like a pig friend, and they're all running around, and we see like time go by, and it's like seasons change or whatnot. And finally there's like a lightning storm after like, I'm going to say like maybe a year or two. It doesn't seem like it's that long, because they all still have their clothes. Their clothes haven't disintegrated, right? So it can't be like decades and whatever. And the dog's still alive, and dogs mature very quickly. So I'd say a year or two is likely. But there's a lot of vegetation growth around here too. But they're in like the Amazonian region. They're in like, Amazonian Brazil. So I got it pretty quick, so I don't know, maybe 10 years. All right, anyway, so finally Suika gets like hit with the revival fluid, and she's like, hooray! And so she runs and like finds her glasses, and then she's looking for revival fluid, but there's like none around, and she's like, oh fuck. And then she goes and gets like the rations. So again, it's like can't be that long, because like the rations her and Francois had, they were in like a glass bottle, right? So they're preserved, but I mean, preservation only lasts so many years. Anyway, so she's like eating, and she's getting like super sad and like crying because there's nothing she can do. And then she remembers how Senku like woke up and by himself like kind of reestablished society, and he's like, I'm a human being, I have the power to do this. She's like, I can do this. And so she's like, all right, I'm gonna do it. And so she like gathers everybody together, and she's like getting food and like establishing like a base, and she's like, I don't know how long it's gonna take, but I'm gonna figure this out. I'm gonna revive everybody. And then we see her like looking off in the distance, like being stoic as like a 6-year-old girl. No, she's probably like a 10. She's got to be like, she's not that little, right? I mean, she's little, but she's not that young. She's got to be like at least like 10 to not 16. She hasn't hit like maturity yet, so probably around like 10, 12-ish. So we might see adult Suika. That'd be fun, because we have 2 more episodes left, and I thought this was the last season, but my understanding is they go to the moon, so maybe there's more. The penultimate episode here focuses on Suika and her journey to resurrect her friends. So we start off, she's gathering everyone together, partially so she can get them all in one place, but also so she can see if anyone has any revival fluid, right? And she's not wasting her time with like the scrubs. So like for example, she's wandering through the forest and she runs into some of Stanley's men, but she just like leaves them alone, right? She's not worried about that shit. But she goes and she tracks down Kohaku, Tsukasa, and Spear Bro. She goes and tracks down everybody else, like Ryu and stuff, brings them all together. And she starts like talking to herself, essentially, because, you know, she's like a 7-year-old. It's like life is real tough, or like a 10-year-old or something. Then she continues to look around, and she's like, oh, what about Pretty Girl and Geologist? She said the name, I can't remember. And so she goes and eventually tracks them down, because Lily, I think is her name. Lily might be wrong. Lily is the name of the singer, I think. Anyway, so Pretty Girl, remember, she tossed like the revival fluid and it crashed on the ground. So that's good, because she's able to find them, and so she's able to bring them back. But she kind of has like a breakdown at some point. She has like several breakdowns in this episode, which is excellent. The show is so fucking good. Like, this is like a fucking shonen anime. It's so good. Goddamn. Highly recommended. Okay. So she brings them back, and then at some point she's like going through stuff. She finds the map from the geologist that she drew out because she had it, and then she's searching Senku for some reason, I can't remember. I think he has some stuff sticking out of his pockets, and she finds a piece of paper, and then she's able to pull it out, and you know, we get a recap on like how, you know, because when she was one of the kids in the original village, Senku taught everybody like Japanese and how to read and stuff, and so she's able to read the instructions, and he has the instructions for the revival fluid, and there's like 3 methods. There's like method 1, 2, and 3. And 1 is like the fastest, but also the most like intense in terms of you have to be very careful when making it. 2 is kind of the middle ground, and 3 just takes like a whole year of like, you got to get the guano or the poop, and then you got to let it sit and mix it with some other stuff and some shells, and you got to just like wait it out for like a whole year essentially, so you can get like the fluid from that based on like mixing the stuff with like other stuff, right? And she's like, oh, 3 is too long, I can't do it. And so she starts working on the first 2 methods. Those bail. She bails because she just like is blowing stuff up, and it's not working out right. And we get a lot of good scenes of her like using her survival skills, right? And you may be like, how's a 10-year-old or 12-year-old or whatever she's supposed to be like surviving in this area? And you got to remember that, I mean, she grew up in like a pre-Stone Age like society, so even as a little kid, she knows like basic survival skills, right? So that's good. So again, the show is excellent. So she's absolutely the most perfect person and to be the one who gets saved at the end of the day, because she can read, she's intelligent, she's resourceful, she has survival skills, and then she can read Senku's like instructions. It's so good. And this is not me just saying, this is all like established throughout like the first 3.5 seasons, or almost 4 seasons, right? Because it's the second to last episode in season 4. And I could have sworn I read somewhere that this was going to be the last season, but there's like 1 episode left. There's absolutely no fucking way. Like, unless they just don't make a 5th season, right? But I'm like, there's no way this is the end of the story. Like, they've even come close to getting to the moon, right? So I guess we'll see where this goes. Okay. that being said, so she finally goes, she finds like Guano Island, and she puts together like the field where she's gonna like use the guano with like the other stuff, and there's like a very particular thing she's got to do, and it's like not too much water but not too little, and she's going, and like, you know, several months go by and things are going well, and then like there's like a torrential rain pour, and all her hard work goes to waste, and she's like, fuck, it's so she's got to start all over again. And so like the whole episode is just her like kind of mumbling to herself, and talking through things and trying to work hard, and then we get like the fun like credit scene with like the theme song from like the theme song from like the ending credits, where she's like working, and then at the end we get Senku, and he's just like counting down in his head like he does, right? And he's like 7 years, and then all of a sudden like we get some drop on him, and so he cracks out, and he looks badass as hell because Suika's made him like some sort of like radical like cape with like E = MC squared on it, and I was like, this is baller shit, man. The show is so fucking good. What's the thing the kids say? It's like aura. It's like the aura farming on this is like off the chains with this look. And then we see Suika, and she now, instead of being like a 10, 12-year-old girl, she's like a sexy young woman. I was like, yes! I fucking love anime. Oh, man, crushing it. Like, this is not fucking hard. And she's like so happy, and she's crying, and she like leaps on Senku. Not in that way, pervs, but because she's so happy to like have her family back, right? And that wraps up that episode. So we'll see how this thing closes out here in a second. All right, so let's wrap this up. This is actually not the end of season 4, as I discovered, because I was curious. Because the episode ends and they don't go to the moon, and I know they go to the moon in the manga. And so I was like, is there a season 5? Because I heard season 4 was the last. And so there's a little trick. But let's talk about this first. Okay, so season picks up, or the final episode picks up with Senku and Suika like hanging out, looking at everything. Senku's like duly impressed and compliments Suika. And then they spend 2 weeks, because Senku knows how to make revival fluid very quickly. So it takes, no, sorry, it's not 2 weeks. He can make the nitrous part with the guano and everything. He can make it in like 1 day, but then they still got to make alcohol to complete the process. And so he's able to put together the revival fluid in like a couple months, essentially, and they revive everybody, and then everyone's like celebrating and having a good time. We get like a lot of nice scenes of everyone complimenting Suika, and Suika just being like, you know, crying happy about how everyone's together and how she's missed her friends and how lonely it was and how great it is to like eat with people, and everyone's doing kind of like shenanigans and all this stuff. And at some point Tsukasa's off like thinking about stuff, and Gen is like, hey Senku, Tsukasa like went over there, and so Senku leaves, and then Gen puts on like a magic show, and what Tsukasa reveals to Senku is that Spear Bro was dead, and so somehow him being frozen by this, like turned to stone and then brought back, it like literally brought him back to life. And so they talk about that. Chrome overhears because he snuck off as well, and he like freaks out because he's like, oh, we can save like Engineer Bro who's super old, and we can like, we're immortal, and that's great. And then Tsukasa's like, it's not great, it's terrible, because blah 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 blah, right? So they have a whole conversation about and discuss that and stuff, and it's like, all right, so we still got to get to the moon. We'll deal with that later, just don't tell anybody. But first let's we got to get to the moon, and the way like we can easily get to the moon because we have like the premier NASA scientists with us. So at that point they undo the stoning for Zeno, and then they reveal to him about like the immortality of like the Medusa stone, and then they also give him an earring that has like a radio transmitter, so they can hear the transmission from the moon, and then it's just static. And he's like, ever since we got frozen again, like it's gone back to being static. So something about something on the moon, and the guy's like, what he wants is for everyone to be stoned, but why does he want everyone to be stoned? I don't know. But if you try to like rebuild civilization, he's just going to do this again. So we have to work together to get to the moon. And then like they just talk about tyranny and stuff. And it's one of those things where Zeno was already having like qualms about kind of his path forward using weapons and being a tyrant and stuff. And so they essentially give him like an out so that he can like regain his dignity and whatnot. And Gen also like overheard them speaking, and he makes like some snide comment, or not some side comment to Chrome that kind of reveals to Chrome that Gen also knows what's going on, but you know, he's a team player. So they just got to keep it under wraps. So then they talk about bringing Stanley back, but before they do that, they're Zeno and Senku, they start working on the NASA space, they start working on the spaceship, right? And that kind of wraps up the episode and wraps up the season. But it doesn't wrap up the season because apparently these motherfuckers. So they did a season 4, which is really like 3 seasons, but they're just calling it all season 4. So they had the first 12 episodes was like the stuff with Stanley and Zeno and all that stuff. And then season 2 was this whole thing with like season 4 part 2, and then they're going to do a season 3 part 3, and that's going to be the Science Engine, I think is what it's called. Future Engine. It's called Future Engine, not Science Engine. And that is supposedly supposed to come out in 2026. So I might do that video and slap it on like right after this or a week or 2 after this, because according to the AI and dudes on Reddit and stuff, it's supposed to come out in spring 2026. It is May. I have not heard anything about it. So maybe it's just going to pop up, and then I don't know if they're going to do a simulcast, which is like kind of cool they do that now, but also I hate it because it means Crunchyroll has a say in how anime's produced and stuff, and Crunchyroll is run by a bunch of retards. So anyway, but yeah, there you go. So that's the thing. So there is not a season 5. There is a season 4.3, which supposedly is going to be 12 more episodes at some point. But and I'm super excited for it because this fucking thing is so hyped. Like, I gotta say, oftentimes I will get super into an anime, and then I will find out like the source of the anime, and I will get into that because there's so much stuff missing, and I don't know what the manga would possibly have that I would need more of, because it's not just that the show is simple because it's a shonen anime, but I feel like it's got so much hype and so much aura and so much like fucking, it's just so good to watch. Like, the animation quality has been standout. They cover everything well. They have like nice moments to breathe. I feel like this anime adaptation is superb. So it's one of those situations where I have to do a calculation because I don't have infinite money. So I can't just like, I like Dr. Stone. Would I read the manga? Yes. Other mangas I want to read more because like their anime never got finished, or whatever other reason, right? Like maybe the anime, like Seven Deadly Sins, for example, they really like cut back on the animation, or Fairy Tail, where the manga is like clearly superior because of the artwork. Stuff like that, right? Where something like a Dragon Ball, it's almost like, I don't want to say it's better per se, but it's like good enough when you watch it that it's like, you know, you're just like, fuck this is awesome. I don't need to, like, I'm sure I get more out of the manga because that's the original source, but like this fucking show is so good. Like, there's other manga I want to collect that are going to like fill that gap, right? That's how I feel about Dr. Stone so far. So this is the end of the current season 4, which is part 1 and part 2. When season 3 or part 3 pops, we'll do a separate video for that. But fucking highly recommend. Excellent. Dr. Stone, the whole thing from start to finish thus far, like, unless they really fuck it up, is like super good. Like, it's one of the best things that has come out in like the recent years, like, period. Not just like for shonen anime or anything. Like, this show is fucking incredible. And yes, just recommend. It's fucking fantastic. All right, go ahead, like, share, subscribe, comment, and I will catch you guys later. Bye.